Okay, Jerry. I'll be serious, Jerry. I promise. I'll try to keep it professional, Jerry. Hey, you
All
bit
right, here
off
we
more
go.
than you can chew today, Jerry.
Welcome to Roll Call, the number one roller podcast, bringing
Woo!
together Birmingham roller factions from all over the world.
Well, Jerry,
Right.
Jerry gonna when Jerry play the intro, we're not gonna say anything. He's
It's
gonna tell
playing
us
right now. All right, we are live, everybody. We're live. Thank you, everybody who's joining in right now. Give us a thumbs up if you could see us and hear us. So today we got a special guest, a legend in the hobby, Mr. Rick Mee. What's up, Rick?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Good, man. You know, I'm glad you finally accepted the invitation after 2 years. You know what I mean? I was giving up. You know.
Nah, I told you nothing personal. The thing is, I run this damn pigeon race. Most guys know that I got this one loft race. It keeps me so busy. I'm so burned out with pigeons 10 months out of the year that when I got free time, I don't, you know what I'm saying? So wife and I usually are on vacation and stuff, so it just never works out. But,
You know what?
hey, you
Hold
got
up,
me
hold
now,
up, guys.
bro.
Hold up. You give me just a minute right here. Sorry to interrupt you, but I forgot to do this.
Recording in progress.
All right, good. We're good. All right, so sorry about that. Go ahead.
Start it over, Jerry.
No, we're good. We're good. I just a backup recording, just in case we lose connection or whatever. I have it.
Oh, okay. The first part was already recorded, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It records through the YouTube, so we're good to go.
Yeah, no. I was just saying that I don't, I didn't intentionally turn down the invitation. I know Ray's been bugging me for a while to do it. You've been asking me, and but I run a one loft race. This is our 9th year going into it, and last year we had about 3,700 birds. So it keeps me extremely busy, extremely stressed out, and believe me, at the end of the day, you just want to sit back and watch TV and BS, with your friends, little text messages and stuff. That's why we've been putting this thing off. Nothing, I've been wanting to do it, just haven't had the time really, I guess.
Cool. So I'm gonna
That's my
let
excuse.
our Ray start this up, man.
Oh
Let him
no.
get going on this. I want to sit
Hey,
back.
Rick.
I want to sit back and listen to it a little bit. You know.
Oh
Well,
my God.
I think most people know that Rick and I have been friends for a long time. We've been knowing each other for quite a long time, so we do shoot each other a lot of shit. So
Yeah.
if you see it happen here, it's just a fun thing. So don't get excited. Rick, tell everybody about yourself. I think most people in the hobby know you. We got a lot of new guys. As a matter of fact, at the California NVRC convention this year, I was surprised how many new people there were in the hobby. And I think that there's a number of families out there. You have your own family and everything. So tell everybody about yourself. So the new guys, at least the new guys know.
Okay. Well, my name's Rick Mee. I'm 56 years old. I've been raising rollers since I was 9 years old. And I was fortunate enough growing up in this area, in the Yakima Valley area, to run into some roller guys that were really super serious about flying rollers. Hell, I can't remember. I think we were the Central Washington Roller Club. At one time, we were the Yakima Valley Roller Club. But a lot of these guys Ray knows who Rich Farr. He's still an active flyer. Rich is in his 70s. In fact, he's the first roller flyer I ever met. That's an interesting story. Remind me, I'll tell you guys about that. But so anyway, I've been, and a lot of some of the guys are still around. Most of them are not flying rollers anymore. But I flew rollers here until I joined the Army in 1988, and went off into the Army. I didn't have my pigeons for about 3 years. They were kept by a friend out here in Washington State, and then I got stationed in Georgia or North Carolina first, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Then I was in Panama, South America, which Ray was in too, but we were not at the same time, just opposite sides of the country. Ray was on the Atlantic side, I was on the Pacific side, and I wish we would have been there at the same time because I would have taught him how to fish. Because he sends me pictures of his peacock bass, and I'm like, okay, I need to show you a real picture, bro. Yeah, I find it one of these days, Ray. But no, I spent 20 years in the military, and while I was in the military, I was in the Army from '88 to 2008, and I retired out at Fort Hood, Texas. And by me being in the military, I moved around a lot around the country and was able to meet people from all parts of the country. And when I got back from Panama in '91, I got back into pigeons. I ran into Joe Bob Stuka, who was in the Air Force at the time. He was stationed right there at Fort Bragg with me because our two bases were connected. Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Pope Air Force Base, just like McCord and Fort Lewis up at, by where Ray's at, where him and I were stationed at together for a while in the mid 90s. But anyway, where the hell was I going with that, Ray? So I flew pigeons. I flew pigeons there. I flew pigeons all over the country, and I think a lot of the familiarity guys got with me is the fact that I moved around a lot and was able to meet different groups of people in different parts of the country. I mean, I flew. The first region I flew in was in North Carolina. Jill, I can't remember the name of that region, but I flew in that region and flew with guys like Joe Bob Stuka, Clay Hoyle. Man, there were some good flyers back there. And then got stationed. Let's see here. I went from there. I got stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington. Flew birds out here against guys like, Ray was in there, Monty Nebel, John Weens. They were very good flyers. When I flew out here in '95, '96, it was always between me, Monty, and John Weens. We were at the top of our game then, flying super good kits. And where the hell else? Then I got stationed in Texas and flew against guys like Kevin Monroe, Alex Hamilton, who was a national champion years back, Joe Joyner, he was a national champion. Just a lot of good flyers all over the place. Now I'm back out here in Washington State. I retired in 2008. I stayed in Texas for a few years because the two oldest kids were in high school. They were both doing very well in school. My son had a baseball career going, daughter Sasha doing tennis, and they were both, high school kids, they don't want to move. So we stayed in Texas a few years. I got into racing pigeons while I was in Texas, so I was flying rollers and racers. And then we moved out here 10 years ago. And I didn't fly rollers for a couple of years because when I was in Texas, I was getting hammered so hard by the Hawks and the Falcons and everything that one day I just quit. I said, I called Tony up, Tony Hatum up in Canada. Everybody knows he's like my little brother. And I said, dude, I'm done. And I said, and I was kind of teary-eyed, to be honest with you. And I sent birds to him. I sent birds to Ray. I sent birds to John Kelly, who the hell else was it over in Amarillo? Johnny Williams, and then Ray got some. So I split them all up around the country because I wasn't sure if I wanted to fly rollers anymore after getting hammered by the Cooper Hawks, mainly in Texas. I mean, I was losing birds every day. And then so anyway, long story short, I moved back to Washington, flew racers for about a year. Didn't hardly ever get hit. So I said, well, I'm going to try flying rollers again. So I got my birds back and started breeding and did pretty good for a couple of years. And then we got real serious about this one loft race business, and that kind of screwed everything up. I just can't perform at the level I want in rollers, but this year is our 9th year. We're going to do it a 10th year. And after that, I probably quit the one loft race business and just get super serious about rollers. But anyway, that's it. I'm 56 years old. I was born and raised in this area, in the Yakima Valley area. I was fortunate enough to be around some good roller guys growing up. The guys that I grew up with flying rollers, of course, they were all much older than me. I was kind of like the little club mascot. I'm a little 12, 13-year-old kid, and they're all in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and those guys were instrumental in getting the World Cup started. Us here in the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, eventually Northern California and Utah, and then they started the World Cup in '91. And then I retired in 2008, moved back here to Washington State, and now I'm just trying to teach Ray how to cook, fish, and fly pigeons.
Nice.
And he's not catching on, man. Every time he cooks some old Louisiana food, he won't invite me over. I'm still waiting on his red beans and rice and all that.
Come on, man, Ray, you got to go over there and hook him up. Put that apron on. And
he won't invite me one time. He just wants to go out to a restaurant and then makes me pay.
Here's the problem. My beans are so good, he would want to come every time I made them. So.
I wouldn't want to leave.
You'll have a room for him right there.
Yeah. So well, Rick, you one of the few guys that we've had on the podcast that's got his own family of birds. Tell us about the initial bird that started your family.
Well, I know what you're getting at, but it goes a little farther than that. I got pigeons. I started pigeons in '76, and there were some rollers mixed up in there. There was a bunch of commies and tumblers, but there was a few rollers. And when I seen that first bird flip over, I was like, holy shit, what was that? I'm like, did that bird just do a backflip? Can you guys hear me still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you must have been motioning to Vicky, go get you some coffee or something. So, so anyway, Ray, to answer your question, my base birds, they go back to birds that came from this area. I was told they were Plona, Pensum birds, but who knows and who cares, really? They were just good pigeons that went back to Pence. They were all Pensum birds. And then, like I said, I joined the Army in '88. In '91, I got stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Joe Bob Stuka was there, and he became like a big brother to me. And we ran around all over the Carolinas, North Carolina, South Carolina, one weekend, like 2 weeks after I was there at Fort Bragg. And he went around telling everybody, he said, hey, this young man, wanting to get into roller. They didn't know I had rollers before. They didn't know I had competed with 20 birds. I had done pretty good when I was growing up. And I did good in our club flies. And so anyway, I went around, and the last guy, and everybody was just basically giving me their culls, birds they didn't know. Just like a lot of us, you're not going to give your very best birds to some guy that just you meet for the first time, because you don't know what they're going to do with them, And so Wendell Carter, he passed away, he's a good friend of mine. He didn't have any birds really to give me, but he had a bunch of young birds in the kit box. He goes, Rick, he said, go over there to that kit box and pick out 2 youngsters. And I said, okay. I said, are you for real? And he goes, yeah, go ahead. And everybody was kind of surprised he was going to let me do that. Anyway, I went over and picked 2 squeakers out, 298 and 395. And they ended up being full sisters. And out of all them pigeons those guys in the Carolinas gave me, I got rid of all of them except for just that 298 hen. The 395 hen, her full sister, is also one I kept, but she would bump once in a while. Clay Hoyle came to my house in '95 for the World Cup finals when Monty Niebel was judging, and I gave him that hen, and then he crossed it into his pigeons. Now, what he did with it, I don't know. Then I went out to Washington State. That's where I met Ray in '95. We were actually stationed together at Fort Lewis for I don't know, 6 months, a year before Ray retired. He'd been in longer than me. And then in 96, yeah, 96. Well, in 95, when I was driving across country with my son Billy, we stopped off. We went all the way from Alabama through Texas down to San Diego. And then we went north and we stopped off and visited Jerry Higgins and Robert Parker. Then the next day we stopped off and then we saw Dave Goss. I got to handle Rusty when he was 8 years old or 20 years old, but the pigeon looked like he was 8. So that pigeon, 1765, was born in 75, and I held him in 95, so he was 20 years old. Outstanding looking bird. He's behind a lot of pigeons in the U.S., a lot of families, a lot of Jackinet families, the Higgins, Reed birds. He's behind my birds, which means he's behind a lot of guys' pigeons. And then we went off and saw David Henderson and Carl Showcroft, who's deceased now, the next day. And then we went home to Washington State. And so anyway, I had noticed that Jerry Higgins had some nice blacks up there, and he also had some Danny Horner birds at the same time. And I knew Danny Horner's birds really, really well because I lived in North Carolina, 45 minutes from him. I was at his house all the time. He never competed, but I knew that all of his birds went back to this cockbird 9058 and her daughter 0362, I believe is what it was. And those are the birds that were winning the California Classic for Elmore Wade every year, if you guys remember way back then. And so I knew this, and so I called Jerry. I said, "Hey, Jerry," I said, "this is Rick again. I was just there 2 weeks earlier." I said, "What do you think of them Horner birds?" He goes, "Well, let's just put it this way. He didn't have anything good to say about them." And so my intention was I was going to cross those Horner birds in with mine because at that time in the mid-'90s, if you guys remember, everybody was about color balancing. Mm-hmm. You had to have light colored birds, dark birds, and all this BS, I bought into that like a big dummy. I never should have. But so I was going to cross some of the Horner black and white birds into my family because I always liked black and white birds. And my family was predominantly grizzle, red grizzle, mealy bars, red chicks, stuff like that, cream bars, cream chicks. And I wanted some black and white birds. So Jerry sent me a cock and I bred from it. And I raised like 100. I polygamy bred him. I bred one cock on 3 hens, a mother and her 3 daughters. And I'm telling you guys, I don't think anybody in the world could have beat that kit when they were on. They were out. In fact, Ray saw them. They were outstanding. They did 3/4. I mean, they were just a fabulous family, and our group of birds. But I ended up culling down to just one pigeon, and we can get into that later why that happened. And then in 2006, I think I was in Alabama or somewhere, and it was really humid and hot, and I couldn't get my birds to elevate, and it was really, making me mad. So I had went around judging the country for the national fly in '96. The first year we had the NBR, it was called the Jim Perry Memorial Fly at first, it was called the NBRC Fall Fly, and then it was the Jim Perry Memorial Fly, and it was now Clay Hoyle petitioned to have it changed to the national championship fly. Anyway, I got 40 young birds from Bob Westfall because I had seen his birds before. I knew what they were capable of. And I got 40 young birds. I settled 39 of them. One bird just flew back and forth for a week. I don't know why it wouldn't land on the loft. And I flew them all out. Be honest, there was a lot of ash and trash in there. There were a lot of birds bumping, rolling down, landing in trees, doing dumb crap. And so I got rid of all of them, but just 2 or 3. And I crossed those into my family. And that's pretty much what I'm flying now. Now, a couple of years ago, Ray will attest to this too, that when Dick Rickner imported those Stratford birds, they were kind of the big craze here in the Pacific Northwest. Remember that, Ray? Mm-hmm. Everybody had Stratford birds. Yeah. And the Stratford birds, I've told people, were the perfect competition pigeon they flew low, they flew slow, they figure 8, they changed directions, they were active birds. They never went real high. They were easy to manage. They had a good temperament. The problem is they lacked in velocity, style, and depth. and that's what we like, right? So I crossed those. I was looking for some for a long time. Mike Larson in down in Oregon, he's out of rollers now. Recently, he just had to quit because of the Hawks, but he tracked down some Stratfords and told me about them. And he had raised, God, 60, 70 of them, and he couldn't fly them because the Hawks were just terrible. And the cops were, the police station's right next door. And, so he couldn't do nothing about them. And so he sent them to me. I flew them out. I picked out just a handful of them and crossed them into my birds. So I'm flying those now. I've got a few crosses, but those will probably all get eliminated because there's some things I don't really care about them. There are some outstanding spinners out there, but I know that's a long answer to your question, but I want to kind of get the story straight on them. But my birds have done well Jerry's had some of my birds. Ray's got some. You got some of my birds. They're spread around the country in Canada, and I'm pretty proud of that.
So all that's out of the your 047 hand and 038. Is that what you created off of all that?
Well, yeah, Jerry, they all go back to those. But since I made that cross, that the 047 hen is the only bird that I kept off of the Higgins cross. Okay, so let me I'll explain this to you. Not a lot of people know the whole story on that, but I took that one cockbird from Jerry 0013 and crossed it in on my birds just because I wanted black and white birds. It's the only reason why. When I saw him and Robert Parker's birds fly months earlier when I was moving across country with my son Billy in the summertime, I was impressed with what their birds reminded me of my own birds, my own family that I was working on. The only difference was they were black and recessive reds. Mine were all, an ash red family, grizzle, mealy barn, all stuff. And so anyway, when Jerry sent me that cock, I crossed him on my hens. I raised a whole bunch, and must have been in '95, because in '96 I judged the fall fly. That was the first year we had the MBRC fall fly.
Yeah, that's when Gil Rand took it on.
Yeah, I judged it. Gil Rand came in first. Man, I cannot remember who came in second.
Jerry Holder.
Oh, Jerry Holder, and then Richard Miller was third, right?
Bob Westfall.
Bob Westfall was third?
Yeah.
Okay.
Richard Miller was fifth.
Oh, Miller was fifth. I like Richard Miller had. Well, I'm not going to get. That's political. I'm not going to get in. He had the best bird in the whole fly, and I was told to pick the best bird in the whole fly. But we did a bulletin coalition shortly thereafter, and I sent the guy who was in charge of the bulletin coalition a picture of that bird, because I think his band number was 570, 572. Richard passed away recently, so he can't tell us, but the editor put his face on that bird's body. Now, why he did that, I don't know. I think there was a little bit of jealousy, but it was a bunch of BS, and I'm still not happy about it. But anyway, what else would you want to know about that, Jerry?
Oh, I mean, you got a lot of people always asking you what's your background on, and I know that. First of all, I want to say thank you, because when I got started, I ran into your birds, and that's what I came. They're all banded 2010 birds from a gentleman. They got them off of you. But anyhow, I want to say thank you, because I looked up your name, and then started Googled Rick Mee and came to a website full of articles, and I just went downtown on that, man. That's where I learned a lot. I want to say thank you for putting in the time into this hobby and sharing all that information with us before this social media started popping off. You know what I mean? So a big thank you to you. But I've always been curious to what the 047 or 338 went back to.
Oh, okay. I know where I was at. I'm getting old, dude. I'm losing my mind here. Okay, so I get distracted. So the thing with 040. Okay, so here's the thing with the 047. So 047 was off of that 298. The father was that 0013 cock from Jerry Higgins, and the hen was 298, which was that hen from Wendell Carter, which is the one that he let me pick out of the kit box. It's the only pigeon I kept out of all those birds those guys gave me and told me to fly or whatever. And so anyway, in '96, I judged the fall fly. And when I came back home 2 weeks later, after judging the fall fly, this is like October, November, I started flying those birds again, and they'd been locked down for 2 weeks, and then I'd have a one bird bump. Then the next day I had like two birds bump. The next day I had like three or four birds bump. And the next day I had like 4 or 5 birds. And it was just crazy. And before I went judging, I honestly, and I'm not just saying this, I don't think anybody in the world could have beat that kid. They were all polygamy bred off of one cock and a mother and her 3 daughters, and they were incredible. But when I rested them for 2 weeks and started flying them again, they all started rolling down. They couldn't handle, and I was talking to some people in California. I said, hey, what the hell is the deal, man? They said, well, you got to fly them birds all the time, Rick. You can't lock them down because that's how they were selected. Just keep flying. You rest them for long periods and they'll roll down on you. Now, I don't know if that was completely true or not. I've talked to Robert Parker about it, and he said that his bird, he used to rest his birds. His birds were fine, but for some reason, those crosses just didn't hold up. So somebody asked me, he said, well, how's those Higgins crosses doing? And I said, well, shit, they were awesome until I judged the fall fly. And then I came back, they all started rolling down. Well, that got back to Jerry, and Jerry got pissed. Jerry got really mad. And he's like, Rick, I told you should have got some hens from me. I said, Jerry, I didn't want to fly your family. I just wanted to cross that cock in. And Jerry got really, let's just say he got really pissed. And so he said, send me my bird back. And I was like, I thought you gave me that bird. And he goes, give me my effing bird back. I'm like, okay. So I sent him his bird back. And then that bird was sold for an exorbitant amount of money, like $800-900 to a guy in California. And so anyway, I moved forward with that one hen. And Jerry really never talked to me after that. But I was just being honest. I mean, I wasn't bad mouthing the birds, but that hen, Jerry, she was off of that Higgins cock, the 0047 hen, and then the 298 hen from Wendell Carter. And the Wendell Carter bird had Jack and Nat bird in it, which went back to Rusty. It was went back to the 762 line, which was a daughter of Rusty. And then it also had some Carl Hardesty behind it and some Roger Baker. So all good performance lines, just all mixed up in there. And, dude, I don't follow like a line per se, like a lot of guys do. I breed the best of the best to try to make my own shit, so to speak,
We have a Sam Sprig asked a question, since you're talking about that right now. And he says, what's kept Rick from totally pursuing a different family of pigeons? Give us some advice on how to cultivate our own group of birds and stay disciplined on the game plan.
Well, that's an easy question. And I know Sammy real well. I've known him since he was real young. I think he's engaged now, about ready to get married. Or if he's not, I hope he's been with the same gal a long time. So he's one of them guys that I've talked to, and I'm not going to say I mentored him too much because I'm not too close to him. But the reason why I've stuck with my family, Sam, is because I've been all over. I mean, I've never judged the World Cup, but I've been to England. I've been all over Canada when they had the best flyers. I've been all over the U.S. I think I've seen rollers in almost every state except for Alaska. And I like what my birds do. And a good roller fancier, a good roller breeder is going to go around and visit the best flyers and then see what those family attributes are of those families, and then decide, hey, is this better than mine? Or do I need to take just a little piece of that and add it to my family to make my family better? It's like creating a family of rollers is like baking a cake. You just got to have the right ingredients. You know what I'm saying? And no family is perfect. There never will be a perfect family of rollers. There's always a family that can be improved. And if you're knowledgeable enough and you get around enough, then you can see who's got what and you know who to go to. Just like me, like I told you, I went to Bob Westfall at one point because I felt that I needed birds that would naturally fly in the heat better, because when I was in Alabama, they wouldn't fly in the humidity. But those jackanets that Westfall had, they would. But when I flew all them Westfall birds out, I saw they had a lot of faults in them I didn't want in my family. But there was a couple traits I did want in my family, which was higher flying, early development, and they would fly in the heat. And my birds wouldn't fly in the heat. They'd race around. They'd piss me off. So that's why I did the cross. But that's a classic example of why you need to be cognizant of what everybody else's birds around the country or around the world are capable of doing, because then you can decide how to create your own family, your own vision, and I'm never happy. I mean, I've never been really truly happy with my birds. I mean, when they've done well in big flies, I kind of like give them a kiss and say, hey, good job, guys. You did me proud, that sort of thing. But I always I'm the kind of person that finds fault in my birds all the time, and I want to make them better. So, I guess to answer Sam's question, I have created what I wanted to create by using different families that I was aware of what their attributes were, and I combined them into one cake and made my own cake.
Nice.
Took all them ingredients and made one little cake.
Yeah. Well, there's something to be said about that, Rick. Now, I've heard guys say two different things. I've heard guys say, oh, everybody out there all of a sudden want to go out and create their own family. And there's a lot of good rollers out there. Why don't you the cake's already been baked? Why even do it? So that's kind of two different.
Well, that's a different situation. That's a different situation, Ray. That's some of us that have been around, like you and me. Jerry's been around a little while now. Sometimes we just have to look in the mirror and say, "Hey, my birds suck. I need to go get something different." Yeah. And when you get that different family, you might go to a convention, or you might get asked to judge, or you might be driving through another state and check out one of the top flyers and go, "Oh my God, my birds are lacking in that right there, and I need that." I'll give you. I was judging Utah 5-6 years ago, and the last flyer was this guy named Blake Coates, and he puts these damn birds. He puts these birds up, right? They were these old Plona birds that went back to a guy named Mr. White. And it was the same guy that Brad Windward got his birds from. But Brad's out of birds now, from what I understand. Anyway, he puts these birds out. In the first break, they were about 300 feet. They rolled halfway to the ground. They rolled like 100, 150 feet. And I'm like, holy shit, man, I need that in my family. And so we went back to Brandon Barnes' house and spent the night. And all I could talk about was that first break. Now, after that first break, they shortened up a little bit. And I think I gave him like a 1.515 or 1.514 in depth, because they shortened up. But in hindsight, I know this is trivial, but I should have gave them like a 1.516 on depth, because they should have got a little more recognition for that. But I kept talking to Brandon about it, and I said, "Holy shit!" And then we got in the truck the next day, and he's taking me to the airport in Salt Lake, and I'm talking about Blake Coates. Like, man, I gotta know more about this guy, and what is the deal, And lo and behold, guess who pulls up next to us in his work truck? Blake Coates on the highway. I'm like, son of a bee, there he is right there. And he's looking at us and smiling. And I said, pull over, man. He pulls over, and I said, hey, Blake, where are you going? He goes, I'm going up towards the airport. And I said, Brandon, how far are you from the airport? He goes, 20 minutes. And I said, let me jump vehicles, man. That way you can go home, go to work early. And he's like, oh, cool, this worked out good. So I got in there and I said, dude, I've been talking about you all morning. And anyway, long story short, we talked about his pigeons. We were going to do an exchange because he wanted birds that would kit better, break together better, and my birds were known for doing that. His birds were extremely deep. And I remember calling Joe Bob Stuka. And I says, Joe Bob, I was at the airport, and I said, Joe Bob, why do we go judge rollers? And he goes, to see if there's something better. And I said, you got that right. And I said, I just found the holy grail of depth, man. And he's like, what? Tell me about it, Rickster. He always called me Rickster. And so I started telling him about how deep these birds were. And then I called Blake a couple days later and started asking him questions. And those old Plona birds, they basically had to be starved down to make them do what you wanted to. And he told me, he said, Rick, he said, when them birds are in good flying condition, I can let them go in the morning and come home at night and they're still flying. And I'm like, well, I don't want that shit in my family. So I kind of looked at myself in the mirror and I says, you know, big dummy, if you want deep birds, just breed your deep ones together. You already got everything else you want, you know, pretty much. And so that's why I didn't do that. But I mean, I know that goes a little astray, but sometimes you gotta think things through too. You can't just spur of the moment go, oh man, I got to get some of them. Think it through, man. A lot of times it's not the birds that you're impressed with, it's the manager's ability with those birds that you just saw. Maybe he's a better flyer than you. Maybe he don't have hawks. Maybe he's in a better area. So take that into consideration before you start jumping ship on getting to the next family that you think
Figure
you're
them
going
out,
to.
huh?
You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times you got what you want right in the backyard, but you just don't know how to use it yet, or you're not disciplined enough. A lot of guys, they got 4, 5, 6 families they're always tinkering around with.
Yeah.
You know, and I respect guys for doing that. There's a lot of guys that try different families because they want to try something different. But you got to come to a point where we there's a reason for creating a family of rollers. If you want to be competitive, you have to have a family that think alike, act alike, eat alike, all that stuff. And we could go really, really deep into how to get the most out of them.
We are, and I remember when I went and visit you, we were talking in your loft, and you explained to me that, you know, one cock was involved in a lot of your producing,
Yeah.
your cultivating, and one of the things you explained to me was that you mess around with the polygamy breeding. And when I recently went to England, I was I was with George, and he had me film his tutorial on polygamy breeding. And I said, hey, you know what? A few years back, I went and visited Rick Mee, and he was telling me about it. He goes, ask Rick who told him about it. So I was like, you know what? I've in the past few days, or in these couple of days, I've had people message me and ask me to ask you about your method of polygamy breeding. And is that a way where you just mentioned that that to get that chemistry and so forth?
Oh, this this is my favorite subject on rollers, period. But I'll tell you, this is how I came about the polygamy breeding thing. I got stationed in Panama in '91, right during the Just Cause invasion, which was when Manuel Noriega was down there. And I didn't have any pigeons. And I remember I was laying in my bed in my room, and I just got promoted to sergeant, so I had my own room in the barracks. Ray can kind of relate to that. You know, when you make E5, you think you're a big shit. You know, you got 3 little stripes on your shoulder, on your collar. Anyway, I'm laying in there and I'm thinking, how can I get my rollers to roll together better? When I get back to the States, I want to be a dominant flyer. I want to kick everybody's ass. I want to be the best. And I came and I said, wait a second, let me breed one cock to a couple hens and then breed the best hens back to the cock. And I didn't even know what the hell polygamy breeding was, man. I had no clue. I just kind of come up with this in my head. And then I got back to the state. This is before we had internet, you know, we had, you know, all that stuff. Everything's kind of word of mouth. You had to read in the book. And so, anyway, I get back to the States, and then I start hearing other people say, well, yeah, we've done that with different breeds of animals, and they do it with pigeons. And I said, really? And so then a few years later is when Joe Bob Stuka and I went over to England, and we spent 2 weeks there, and we hung out with George Mason, Les Bizance, and George Kitson. And we visited all the top guys in England. And yeah, George did show me his bull system, his setup, and all that stuff. But and George kind of reinforced it in my brain. But no, he's not the one that told me about it. But being a highly respected roller flyer, yeah, of course, you know, with his record and everything, because he was very much more well known than me at that time. I mean, I'm just a kid, in my early 30s or whatever, but anyway, polygamy breeding. This is what I want. This is the main thing I wanted to talk to you guys about today. If you truly, truly, truly want, I'll ask you. I'll ask this question: have you guys ever flown a kit of just cocks? Have you ever flown a kit of just hens? Do you see that there's a difference between those cocks and hens, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
The way they fly, the height. My experience has been that the hens typically go higher. They're more active. They fly longer. They're much more active, and they're not. But the cocks will fly lower and they roll deeper and they don't fly as long. Am I right? Okay. And we agree that cocks and hens are different than each other, right? They don't act the same. They require different feed and all that other stuff. Have you ever noticed that when you have full siblings in a kit, they tend, if you really pay attention and watch them carefully, they'll be together and they'll roll together. And a lot of times the other ones won't. Okay, so it's obvious that if you want to get the most out of rollers, and before I get into that, I can tell you this, that if you really dig deep on the top roller flyers, the consistent guys, their families are usually based around just a pair of pigeons or maybe a cock and a couple of hens, or two hens and a cock. You know what I mean? I mean, they're all based around a core group of pigeons.
Yeah.
And they all line up physically and psychologically. So if we know that cocks and hens are different within the kit when we fly them separate, then obviously we're not going to get the ultimate concert performance when we mix the two sexes together, right? It's just like Monty Neba one time said, this is kind of a cute thing that he said. One day he called me after he had talked to Brian Krog, which was kind of like his little protege growing, Brian, everybody knows Brian and Monty were connected. Monty was older than Brian, and he used to pull him out of the bedroom at night, say, hey, let's go fishing, dude, and his parents would get pissed. Anyway, he called Brian one time. He said, Brian, I just read this book, Women Are from Venus and Men Are from Mars. And he said, I just figured out how to fly rollers. Cocks and hens are different. And so this is like a year before he wins his last World Cup. I was in third at the time, and he calls me and told me, Rick, I just set a new record. I have just raised the bar. This kit is better than the one you flew in Yakima. I'm like, oh my God, I got to hear this shit from Monty, but it all rings true. I mean, look, so here's the deal. This is the way I think. If you want to get the most out of a kit of rollers, I'm taking them to the ultimate, is first of all, take a cock and mate them to one hen, just one hen, and breed a kit of full brothers and sisters. Have you guys ever done that? I've done that. And I can tell you that the kits that are flown like that are a difference between night and day between what I'm flying now. I mean, they break bigger, they kit better, they act off each other. They just everything. They're like almost robotic in their motions, and that's what you want out of a kit of rollers. Racing pigeons, totally opposite. You want individuals that are 100% motivated. Racing pigeons, you want them all like clones or rollers. I think that's what I said. So if we know this, then to get the best out of a kit of to get the ultimate, in my opinion, would be a kit of not full brothers and sisters, but a kit of full brothers and a kit of full sisters. Now, I'm in the process of doing that right now because I decided I have to up my game. I haven't bred any rollers for 2 years. I've been flying my scrub. I've been flying my breeders. I'm flying everything I got just to participate in the region, and I'm still qualified, but it's not working for the finals. I got a bunch of old breeders. It just, so I'm going to raise about 100 this year and try to show these guys how to fly some good kits. It's not so much trying to win; it's just trying to educate and show people this is what the breed's capable of. Most people have never seen the breed at its optimum performance, so they don't think it's possible. It's just like Brian McCormick just had an astronomical fly, and I talked to him after he had that fly, and he was genuine. I didn't say a word. I mean, he just kept talking and talking, and I just and he was telling me about the weather conditions and everything. You don't see performances like that very often, but they are possible. Don't think that it's not possible, because it is. But in my opinion, if you want to take this, you got to find a cockbird that clicks on a particular hen. Hopefully, she's fairly young, and just use foster parents and breed the hell out of them, and put all those birds in one kit, and you will see this breed at its best. Now, Ray, back in the mid '90s, can tell you that he came to my house several times. And when I was flying at Murray Campbell's house out by the firing center, and see Ray was in the dental profession in the Army, and he had to go check on this little dental clinic that they had at the firing center every once in a while, especially when the guard and reserve, whatever, trained, right, Ray, something like that. Mm-hmm. So he had to make sure they had a running dental clinic, so if anybody needed dental work, they could go there, and he'd come visit me. And I was single at the time. I was getting divorced, and Ray was being Ray, doing his thing, coming over to he'd have to come to my side. He saw that kid. That's why it's interesting that we're talking about this now, because he's the only one that ever saw my birds at their best. Ray, that kid flew for like 3 hours.
Oh yeah. No
and
doubt.
Every minute they were doing 3/4 turns. Yeah. I mean, it was incredible. And they were all off of that Higgins cock, made it to those 4 hens, which was a 298, and her 3 daughters that were full sisters. Now imagine how much better they could have even been if they were all cocks or all hens off of one pair. So
I'm going to tell you something. This is probably the first time I've ever heard anybody say that. I mean, that's pretty big information, Jerry, when you think about it.
Yeah.
The difference, because we all know, if you've been around rollers long enough, we all know the difference. There is a big difference between cocks and hens. They eat differently, they fly differently, they act differently. There's a big difference. So separating them and flying them like that, I mean, how many guys have you heard say that?
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed, that a lot of the people that are competitive and that I've gone and visit, they're like, the birds they cultivated, they're shrunk down to minimum pairs. They're highly related. They're flying half brother, half sisters, and that's one of the things that I kind of recorded to myself. And these past few years, I started little by little trying it out. And I went down from so many pairs to less pairs, and I started putting in this cock to this hen, this cock to this hen, and then my beginning went with 1 cock to 2 hens, and now I'm going further in that, and it's a difference, it takes time and knowledge how to do it. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people now have heard about this polygamy type of breeding program, but they're not quite sure on how to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's work.
You just got to find the right pair.
Yeah, you need the right pair, and you gotta. It is work. It's harder. I mean, it takes more attention than a lot of roller guys are willing to give. But hell, if you want to be up there, that's what you got to do.
Well, you could. The easy way to do it is breed from 10 or 12 pair, like most guys do. They want to raise a whole kid at a time, and I understand that. And you can be a world champion, you can be a national champion breeding that way if you got a good family. There's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. All I'm saying is, if you want to take it to the next level, you have to polygamy breed. And in my opinion, if you can breed a whole kit of full brothers or a kit of full sisters, man, you'll set the world on fire.
Rick is totally right about that kit. I mean, I saw it a lot of times. I mean, I I think we laid in the yard watching those kids for 2, 3 hours at a time.
Well,
Like over
last,
days.
yeah, that
Yeah,
last time you saw them, Ray, when they were, it was like in the summertime, and that grass was real tall up around the back of the kit boxes because I kept my
yeah,
birds at another guy's house, Murray Campbell. He's not an active flyer anymore. He's still alive, but he comes out here and works on my house and stuff once in a while. Anyway, um, Ray and I watched that kit for about 2 hours, and they were just hammering these big breaks, and they were kind of caught. What I think it was is they got caught in an air pocket up in the air. It was kind of warm, and they got caught in a warm air pocket. They couldn't get out of it. And after about 2 hours, Ray said, "Ricky, I gotta go." I said, "You sure?" He goes, "Yeah, I gotta get." He's just shaking his head. He goes, "I gotta get back across the pass." I'm like, "All right." So he went home, and they flew for about another hour. And when they came down, they were just totally exasperated. I mean, they were just sitting there on the kit box with their wings open, their tails flared out, and their eyes blinking like they were in a daze.
mm-hmm.
It's the weirdest damn thing I ever seen, man. I'm like, what the hell? I've seen them do that a particular birds, but not the whole kit. I think there were 21, 22 birds in that kit, and they were just, I mean, and I'm not talking waterfall breaks. I'm talking about well, we could talk about that too. I hate families. If you have a family that just arbitrarily flies along and then they like hit a wall and start rolling, you're going to get waterfall more times than not. You need to get. Remember Ray when we were at the LA convention. You, me, and Ray. You, me, and Tony, and I think even Aaron was there too. And we were watching Tim fly his kit, and he had some good spinners. But the point is, Tim made a statement that stuck to me to this day, and he said that the best kits will fly along, and then it's like they pause and take a breath. It's like they go, and then they break.
Yeah.
That's what you want. And
they set themselves up. You know what I mean?
Yes. You don't want a kid that's just flying along and all of a sudden they go, here, I'll start rolling. Man,
Yeah.
There's certain part of the country where I see that a lot. And I hate that, man. I just hate to see them fly along and then just hit a wall and roll. I want to see them when they're really, really on. They're not super active, but they'll set up, pause. It's like they take a breath. I know they don't communicate because they got the brain about the size of a pea, but somehow they sense each other's energy or whatnot, and they set up and they pause and then they hammer it simultaneously at exactly the same instant. That's what you want, guys. You don't want any of this bullshit waterfall. I mean, everybody's got that. Hell, my birds do that when I don't got them fed right. But if you know how to set your birds up right, you get the right weather conditions. That's when they break big. They'll set up and break, but not every family's capable. That's another thing. That's why, going back to Sammy's question, you have to go around and see everybody's birds to know who has what, because a lot of families, especially in the U.S., do not have that attribute.
Now you
That's what we're lacking.
you said you went to England in what, 96?
I think it was 96, yeah.
At that time,
95 or 96.
at that time, what the states was going on. I'm pretty sure they were after the deep birds fast. When you went over there, what did you see? Was it something different than here that maybe kind of opened your eyes a little bit more and the true competitive style, or what did you see different over there?
To be honest, I'm going to be brutally honest. Most of those guys over there were flying birds that were similar to what I was flying. I had developed. See, you got to remember, I grew up flying 20 bird competitions with the guys that started the World Cup, so I was well acquainted with what it took. And at that time, I was breeding everything off of cockbird that I raised in high school, believe it or not. Or no, he was a year after. He was born in '87. I graduated '86. He was off my 215 cock. I made him to that 298 hen, and I had a full kit of full brothers and sisters. This is why I talk about the full brother sister thing, because I raised 37 of them in North Carolina that were full brothers and sisters. Let me tell you guys, there ain't many people that could beat that team. And so when I went over to England, I saw more of that. So there's nothing in England that made me want to switch families or anything, but it validated what I was already doing and what I believed in. And when I was talking to those guys, They had families that were on. The thing about the guys in England at the time, they didn't have a predator problem at all. None. Zero. I remember George Kitson and Les Bizants. We saw a sparrowhawk there, which is kind of like our sharp shin. And that was the first one they said, what the hell was that? And we're like, well, that looked like a Cooper hawk. And they're like, well, that's what we call a sparrowhawk. But that was the first one they had ever seen. And then when they came to the States, Bizants and Kitson, they saw their first hawk attack in their lives. When Eric Laidler judged me in Texas, he had just had a sparrowhawk catch his first bird ever in his life. That's the difference. These guys, there was one guy, I think his name was Ian Lawrence. I might be wrong. He lived out in the country, and he was having a falcon. Other than that, no hawks, no nothing. They all had old bird kits. And what the point I'm trying to get to is they would breed from their breeders and then put them back in the air. And I didn't see anything over there, Jerry, that really stood out to me other than the very first kit that we saw the very first night we were there. It was Les Bizant's. He put up a kit of old birds and he put them up really late in the evening. And a lot of us know by now that if you fly your birds right at dusk, they get that pucker effect. You know, you get more activity out of them. They roll better. They roll more collectively. And his birds really were doing good. They were doing some really nice half turns that night, and they were rolling with really good velocity, style, and depth, medium depth. Other than that, I didn't see anything that really stood out to me in England. But their birds did fly a nice pattern. They didn't fly ultra high, a good wing beat. That gets overlooked a lot, especially here in the States, because everybody's always about velocity and depth. That's all they care about, velocity and depth. Well, let me be the bearer of bad news, guys. There's more to a roller than just velocity, style, and depth. I mean, I left the style part out because a lot of guys wouldn't know style if it hit them in the face. They're just looking for a good deep bird that rolls fast, But I go to like conventions or I've judged before, and guys ooh and ah over birds that are extremely deep, but they're not impressive rollers. I would rather have a pigeon roll, 15, 20 foot and ball up like a blur than a pigeon roll 50 foot and roll with his wings open slow.
So
That's me.
you feel when you talk about the wing beat, is that part of the big bust or the unisons in that allows them to set up like you mentioned earlier?
Yes, sir. You got it. They got to have that slow wing beat, Jerry. And a lot of guys, they want you to believe that the pigeon has to be a certain body type and all this be it. They try to sell you on that they're like some what the hell is it? Like a snake doctor or something. Like they have some secret inside of them that they can select your best breed. It's a bunch of BS. You got to fly them out. If the bird rolls right, it's got the right type, right? That's what really matters. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule, and you don't breed from those. But most of the best birds fall within a fairly narrow realm right in there. But I don't know if that answered everything.
Yeah, I know, like
Oh, you're talking about the wing. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is where I was going with that. So I didn't mean to cut you off,
Yeah, go
but
ahead.
here's the thing. Here's one thing I will say about the Birmingham roller: that the best birds have a certain look, and I don't want everybody to go out and start culling. But I've said this before. There's three looks in rollers. All right, you got some that look crazy, like who's that guy? Gene Wilder. Remember the actor that's got the crazy red hair and he just has this crazy look. He's like crazy looking. Okay, those birds are usually roll downs. And then you got some that have a really nice, calm demeanor about them and a really calm look. I don't know who to give you an example of that, but somebody has a really calm, and you just when you talk to them, it's like a warm feeling, and they're not too boastful, they're not weak-minded, they're just a good, honest looking person. Just like when you look at a dog, you can tell if a dog is crazy or if it has a good look or if it's mean. And then you got some that got this look like an eagle eye look, and I call it like the Clint Eastwood look, like, all right, make my day, dude. you don't want to breed from the birds that look crazy, okay? And you don't want to breed two of the birds together that have the eagle eye, because then you get a bunch of stiffs. You want to mate from the birds in the middle together, or you take the birds in the middle and mate them to the birds with the stronger looking eye. But to be honest with you, I don't look at all that when I breed, because I'm I'm now in a position where I can fly my birds out for a couple years if I want to, because I'm not getting hammered by the hawks and the falcons like I was in all the other places I lived around the country. And that's one of the reasons I moved back here, is because I knew there wasn't much of a bird of prey problem out here in the desert. But the thing about the wing you're talking about, the birds that fly slow have more of a fuller wing. It's like the ends of the flights on some of these birds have a real knifey wing, like a steak knife, real sharp. And then you have some that have like a butter knife shape to them.
Mhm.
That's the ones I like. That's the ones that fly nice and slow. They have a little bit of a back wing. And I'm not talking a big parachute wing where the birds roll, you can count the revolutions. I'm talking about a bird that's got a little bit of substance to its wing. And if the flights are real pointy, that's when you get these birds that are just flying like this all the time, and they don't ever slow down. You need to have a little bit of smoothness to the outer edges of those flights, and then they fly nice and slow, and they can set up for the breaks. And that's what I want. I want a family of birds that fly at a moderate height. They figure eight, and they fly slow, and they set up for the breaks, and they explode together. That's what I want. I don't want a family that just flies around one direction, or occasionally changes, and then they dart around, and then they like hit a wall and break. I mean, that's just, it looks like chaos to
Would
me.
you say that's kind of like a part of like good temperament, or is just the style of the pigeon?
Just the way the wings
Yeah.
get built, I think. But a lot of these pigeons, Jerry, you'll see that the ones I'm talking about with the smooth, with the rounded flights and stuff, they tend to be like a softer feathered bird, and they feel a little more puffy in the hands, if that makes sense. A lot of these guys, they get all excited about these pigeons with the feathers like glued in place. They
Yeah.
look like a little mini racing homer. I've never seen any of those turn out to be really, really great performance rollers. Most of them are a little softer in the feather, and when they come down from rolling, a lot of times the feathers on the heads and the neck and the breast will be spread out, and those pigeons tend to be more gentle and not so skittish. If you get one skittish bird in the kit box or in the loft, it makes all the other pigeons, just like Ray. I'm not going to name any names, but Ray, I know Ray's tried some birds out from some top guys, and the birds had a high. They were wild. They were crazy pigeons a little bit. You put one of them in the kit box, it makes the other ones go crazy, right, Ray?
Yep.
It
Yep.
affects the character. One crazy pigeon.
Yeah.
So most guys that have gotten birds from me have always said that the birds were kind of calm, and the reason for that is because it's something I bred for. I mean, I don't think all this stuff out. It's just kind of like a feel. I mean,
Yeah.
you want birds that have nice characters, and I guess over the years, if I had a pigeon, no matter how good a spinner it was, if it acted crazy in the kit box and I felt like it was affecting the others, that sucker lost his head. You get rid of them. It's easy, man. Breed a bunch and cull hard. It's not hard. Easy sport, easy hobby.
Yeah, you just gotta find your niche on what you're looking for and what's making it work for you, and kind of be a mad scientist, I guess, or something, and figure it out. Because
Don't
not,
overthink it though, man. It's
yeah.
just
Well, the
breed
thing
a
is,
bunch and pick from the air, and select your breeders that way. Don't worry so much about wing and eye and expression and family.
you
A
don't think?
lot of guys, they're always trying to keep their families pure, and I'm like, why do that? If I go to your house and you're finding this one family and they all real deep and nice, and then but they're rolling like individually, and then you got this other family and they're all rolling short to medium, but they're breaking big. I'm like, dude, why don't you take a cock from that family and cross it into these birds and have a better family altogether? You
You
know,
said like select the best of best. Would that be just on the performance? Because I'm a true believer. Like, I've been doing a lot of reading, studying, talking to a lot of people, and I think when you breed best to best, there is a chance to deteriorate the not the performance, but the ability of the bird to perform that. Because I think that birds have certain traits that make the bird weaker than the other. So, um, I mean, this is very strong in with racing guys, and they go more into the health of the pigeon. Do you feel that that could be an issue when you breed like that and not looking for nothing else but just the performance? I mean,
No.
you know, I do I feel that it is, you know. So
I, I was talking to a guy yesterday, Jerry, about, because I do racing pigeons as a business.
yeah,
And I was talking to a guy the other day, and he said, Rick, he said the Belgians, they don't do all this family crap like we do. They just make best of bet. They just make the champions to the champions. And that's exactly what they do in Belgium. That's where racing pigeons started, pigeon racing. They breed best of best. So if somebody is like the national champion of Belgium or the Barcelona winner, or something, then they go and they try to make those two together is what they do. And they just keep working forward. They don't try to create a family per se. Because remember, in racing pigeons, we're trying to get them to be individualists, and we're trying to get them to race home as fast as possible and have strong characters. Rollers, you're doing the opposite. You're trying to get them suckers to all be like clones and think the same. It's just like when you have a twin, people have twins, and a lot of times twins are mentally connected, and they'll call each other at the same time. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
No, I know I
Yeah.
have twins, and they finish their sentences, and
Oh, you do got
yeah, I
twins?
have my youngest boys are twins.
Oh, I didn't know.
They're 23, but they have like same expressions on the face, and their
Yeah.
reactions, and they sound the same. So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so that's why when you see stuff like that, it should be a sign to you on how to breed rollers, because if your twins have the same mannerisms and they finish each other's sentences and all that stuff, you're like, okay, wait a second. If I had like 18 more of those guys, I could fly a whole kit of those dudes and they
Yeah.
would be all like finishing the sentence
You
at the
know what?
same
Now,
time.
right now that you're saying that, I'm like, damn, man, that's true, man. Because I see it. I see it in my sons, and that's very true, man. If I had 18 more of my son, I'd probably have a good soccer team or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just saying that when here's something too. A few years ago, we were at Ted Mann's house, and it was right after he had won the World Cup, and he was feeling pretty good. He was going through some ailments. I took you over there, Jerry. I took
Yes,
you and
yes.
Ray over there, and I took Ray and Tony over there, and I think you and I went ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah, you and I went by ourselves. And you told me the other day that's when you started this podcast idea thing, because you and I
Correct.
went over there and we did a little interview with Ted Mann. We did one with me, which I was just starting to breed rollers again, and that's like 7 or 8 years ago. And but anyway, Ted Mann, after he won the World Cup, he wasn't doing real well health wise again. He kind of had fallen off the table a little bit, was taking his oral meds and stuff, trying to stay alive. And he flew the 11 bird, or no, he flew a 20 bird. And I remember John Farr was the judge. And the birds didn't do that good, but he had 5 or 6 birds that were still in the air at the same time. And I was watching these pigeons, and those guys were over there BSing, and I'm looking up because Ray knows me that when I go to somebody's house to watch their birds fly, if they don't watch them, I get pissed. I mean, I'm like, if you come to my house and you're more interested in looking at the birds in the cage, just go home. I mean, you don't need to be at my house. You're not a roller flyer. Go get some fancy pigeons, get some fantails or something. Anyway, watch the pigeons. So I'm watching the birds, and I go to Ted. I say, hey, Ted, I said, are those birds by chance full brothers and sisters? And he looks up there and he goes, yeah, they are. How'd you know that? I just knew. You could tell by the way they flew, and they acted to each other, and they acted off each other. They weren't just a family; they were siblings.
Right.
And that's why if you have a cockbird that has worked good on one particular hen, or maybe a couple different hens, try them out, man. Just dedicate yourself 1 year to polygamy breeding. It's not hard.
Yeah,
Man, I raised 100 birds 1 year off of that Higgins cock in my hens. You can do it, and you will reap the rewards big time in just for your personal satisfaction, but also in competition because they'll work together better. And then, so my suggestion would be if you got a cockbird that has worked good on a couple different hens, maybe 2 hens, put him back with those hens and maybe a third hen, and just breed the shit out of him 1 year, just him, and use everything else as fosters. Fly him out, and then figure out, after a year and a half of flying those babies, which one he nicks with the best. I mean, that's an old term. The old school guys uses nick instead of click. Like click pair, nick pair. So the old guys used to say nick pair. But when they nick together, then the next year, that's when you go full balls to the wall on that damn one pair, and you say, I'm just going to foster everything.
yeah.
And I'm going to breed me a whole kit off of that one pair, man. And you'll be thanking me
Yeah,
for it.
that's what I did. I was hearing you out, and it always stuck to me, and I always Google polygamy breeding, but I decided, like I said, you know what, I'm gonna use a cock that I bred out, flew for a couple years, then I bred him and saw the offsprings perform. So I wanted to make sure it was a good producer as well. And that's what I'm using right now. I'm using a 2018 cock, and man, he's a superstar. You know what I'm saying?
Let me tell you something, Jerry, that this is kind of an interesting story. So everybody knows Tony got birds from me about 12 years ago.
Oh, he loves you, man. You're always in his conversations, bro.
Yeah, that's my little brother, man. I talked to Tony because excuse the language, Ray won't answer the damn phone, so I got to talk to somebody. Ray won't even call his own mother, and he'll tell you that. Ray don't like to talk on the phone. That's why, hey, when I found out Ray was doing these podcasts, I was kind of pissed. I called Tony. I said, I call Ray all the time. He don't even talk on the phone, but he's got time to do 2-hour podcasts on the weekends. Do that, man. I ain't doing that podcast. No, I'm just playing. But what the hell was I going to say? So anyway, so Tony, when Tony got birds for me, he was wanting, I don't know if he's watching right now. He told me he would be. But Tony said, was wanting pedigrees. I'm like, what the hell are you going to do with them pedigrees, man? They don't mean nothing to you. They mean something to me. They don't mean nothing to you. He's like, nah, I kind of want to get pedigrees. So Tony's real nice, so he's not going to push the issue. And so a couple of years ago, I think Van Hook was asking me about a pedigree or something. So I dug my record book up, which, man, be honest with you, I haven't kept up good with it lately. I need to get serious about it. I started in 91, and I got some records prior to that too, and they're all very intense records. When the bird, father, mother, when the bird was hatched, when it started rolling, all this stuff. Anyway, a couple of years ago, I had my pedigree book out. I meant my pedigree, but my record book. And I called Tony. I said, look, man, I said, I got the book out. I found it. If you want to know anything, you better ask me right now, because I'm putting this sucker back away. And so he started asking me about some of his key breeders. And guess what? They almost all went back to the same damn pair.
Dang.
Now, if he would have, it was, the hell was it? 2476 and 2513. 2476 and 2513. And 2513 is an easy number to remember because that was Ray's house number. Mm-hmm. Isn't that right, Ray? Or is it 2515?
No, 2513.
Yeah, I remember I pulled up to his house. The one he just moved out of, his house number was 2513. I'm like, son of a bitch, But anyway, so if Tony would have known what those birds were out of, he may have bred differently, you guys. I know he would have. Because we're human beings. Mm-hmm. We go, I can mate this bird to that and all this other crap. Nah, just select from the air. And then Tony found out on his own that he asked me 7 or 8, 10 pair, and like 7 or 8 of them are all out the same damn pair. And he would have never known. That would have never happened had he had the pedigrees. That's why I'm real reluctant to give guys pedigrees. Now, here's another thing. Ray's got a cock over there at his house that I flew out because a couple of years ago he had falcons so bad he couldn't fly them. So he raised a whole bunch of birds off of my birds. He's got South Africans, a couple other things since then, but he had a bunch of birds for me, and he bred a bunch. Couldn't fly them, and I said, "Shit, bring them to my house, man. I'll fly them for you." So it was like what 25 birds, Ray, and I flew these birds out. And there was this one cock and his sister, 128, 127, and 128. 127 was a little hen. She would only roll like 15 foot, but man, she was a blur, right, Ray? She was a blur.
Yeah, she's good.
And her brother, 128, Ray's got him now because I didn't want to breed from him. I might use him again. That's why I keep asking him about him lately. And then I got, and then there was a black white flight, and that bird was tremendous too. I never figured out what it was out of, but anyway, we had an 11 bird fly coming up, and I put those 3 birds back in the air. They were locked down for about a couple months, and son of a bee, the damn falcon came and took. I mean, I let them out one time, and that 128 cock came back. The other 2 did not, which I was pretty upset about because out of 25 birds, that's the only 2 I kept. Now, I'm not. There was some really good birds in there. Ray did a good job of breeding them, but the reason I bring this up is because that cock bird 128 is off of her mother. 2538 is a full sister 2513. So it's the best stuff. Now, the father to that bird was a black white flight, which was 421, right? I think 421. 422 is a bird I donated to the MBRC, and it went for like $600. It was a good spinner. And 421 came in to spin real late, like 13 months, but he was a really good bird. Well, I sent that bird to Tony a couple years ago, and he bred some really, really good birds off of that cock. Mated back to, nephews or nieces and stuff of, or what would it be? Yeah, it'd be nieces of 25, his off of 2513 also. So they're all related. But that cockbird died at Tony's last year or something. He had some sickness that go through the birds, and he lost that particular pigeon. But I think that's just kind of an interesting story that Tony's birds all went back to that one pair, and then this one cock that I flew out from Ray, which was a really special spinner, goes back to the same. The hens are full sisters to each other. They're all the same stuff.
So Rick, you mentioned that you probably breed about 100 offsprings this year. I don't know how many pairs will you use, but where I want to get at is you're gonna start breeding these pairs, and I've seen you fly some mob flies. What's the best way for you to train young birds, like from the point you wean them from the parents?
Well, Jerry, let me back up a second. When you came to visit me the first time, I was just getting breeding rollers again, remember?
Yes.
I had 8 pair in there, remember?
Yes.
All the cocks, there was a cock in there, 176, and then I had his 7 sons. So it was a cock and his 7 sons, and they were all mated to daughters off of that cockbird, the 128 cock from Ray. They were all blue hens, and I mated them to these cocks, and that's what I was flying in the regional flies. And I mean, Ray will tell you, I haven't had really, really great flies in the last few years because I've been busy with this damn pigeon race. But there's been times where Ray come over and them birds were doing really good, and they were all, let's see, they would be full brothers and sisters to each other if they were off the same pair, or they were first cousins. You see how I did that? So they were all rolling together good like that. Jerry, you're asking how, anyway, I just wanted to point that out. You're asking how to start the young birds, get them going?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of us are getting starting off right now in our breeding season, and we're about to start flying some youngsters. I want to know. I want to see, pick your brain on what's your program with the young birds.
So, program with young birds. It's no different really than anybody else. I mean, all I do is I put them in a kit box, give them a little flight pin to go in and out. I have trap door on the front with the bobs. I force them out there for about a week, and then I whistle to them before they come in. And once they're doing that, then I basically just take the flight cage down and scare them out. I don't care if they fly all over the neighborhood; they're going to come back. And then I fly them every day. I do not fly them twice a day. I don't think that's necessary. I know some guys. The only time I did it in Texas one time, and I just did it and the only thing it did was get them kitting better, quicker. But my birds typically are going to kit within 4 or 5 days anyway. Ray will tell you that. I mean, they're a tight kitting family. In fact, they can kit so tight that they can drive you nuts at time. And if you give them too much protein, they'll fly fast, one wing and stuff. But so I start them off like everybody else, and I just fly them once a day, and I feed them a good mix. And the mix sometimes even's got popcorn in it. I probably feed them too rich, but that's just what I do. And I fly them that way, and I fly them every single day until they get into a rut. When they get into a rut and they're flying like just one direction, they
Oh man. Well, if you're listening
fast,
to us,
then that's when I'll give them a day.
hey,
Yeah,
you
lose
know,
you for a second.
you froze for a
I can
while.
hear you. Okay, so we'll go back to we're talking about young birds.
Yes.
We working now? Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just start the young bird. You only froze for a few seconds, Jerry. I kind of saw you. I was gonna say, hey, you guys listening to me because I saw you both not moving.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just start them off like everybody else, and then I feed them a mix, and then I fly them every single day. I don't think flying them twice a day is necessary, at least with my birds. And and uh, um, and then if they get into a rut, like they start flying one direction or doing something stupid, then I'll give them a day off, and I keep them on the mix. And if they get to the point where they start flying too high or too long or something, then I switch them to a flying mix, which is real heavy on white wheat. It's got a little bit of red mite, so it's basically let's see, it'd be 60% white wheat, 60% white wheat, 10% safflower, 10% Milo, uh, uh, 10% barley, and then 10% Austrian peas. And that's what they get. And a lot of times I won't even put the peas in there. I'll just add the extra wheat. But that's the flying mix, and I just fly them every day. My birds typically come in the roll at 5 months, 6 months, 5 to 7 months. Sometimes I get some that come in a lot earlier, and man, if they last, I get excited about those because I mean, who doesn't want their birds to come in early, right? So when I get some that come in really early, I used to write it all down, but now the ones that come in that early is what I'm talking about, like 3.5, 4 months old. If they're already rolling, and they last, man, I get excited about those. If they can last for a year and a half, 2 years or whatever, then I'll breed from those birds and try to get earlier development into my pigeons. But I treat my young birds good. I don't treat them any different. It's all about being disciplined enough to get your ass out there and fly your birds every day, and if you can, it's preferable that you fly them in the morning because they'll lift with that early morning, uh, the early morning light and everything. They lift better and they fly a better pattern. If you fly them in the evening a lot, that's a good way of stimulating them for rolling. But I don't prefer to fly them in the evening. Now I know Ray does because that's what works out for his schedule. He's still working. He needs to retire, but he likes money too much. So, but yeah, but it's better, I think, to fly your birds early in the morning if you can.
Yeah.
Some people, but you got to fly when you can to avoid the birds of prey too. I know Ray flies in the evening because if he flies in the morning, he's going to get attacked. So you got to work that out too. So, but the bottom line is, I guess it really don't matter when you fly them. I prefer to fly them in the morning. I think Ray would prefer to fly them in the morning too if he could, because I know his ass. He likes to be at home sitting in front of the TV with a bowl of popcorn.
Yeah, I know. Like
Something else.
20, I think it was 2022. You were flying a kid, and you're on Facebook, and it was a black. I think it had black and white tips on it, and you're like, man, if that bird keeps on working nice, it's gonna go to breeding off, and there's quite like a couple of videos you talked about that bird that he was flying. It was such a great bird, but when do you get to the point where you decide that you can't go forward with these birds. Like you breed 100, if 80 make it or whatever from your bird of prey accidents, whatever, and you have all these pigeons left, and breeding season's coming along again. Where do you make the decision to where like these birds are gonna go further to second fly season, or these ain't gonna make it? How, I mean, because we could come to a point where we just like overload ourselves with pigeons, or hoarder pigeons. You know, when is it time to start culling birds and just keeping the ones that, you know, they're going forward?
Well, it's kind of there's a couple of ways you can go with that answer to that question, but basically, has a lot to do with how much kit box space you got, how much room you got on your property. And it has to do with whether the bird's rolling or not, Jerry. I mean, if you got a bird in your kit box that's a year old, and you got a whole bunch of them, and they're a year old, and they're not doing nothing, then you have to decide. And if it's known within that family that you have to fly them into the second year, and it's a really good family, then maybe you want to hold on to them. But me, I want my birds rolling before that. So if I got birds that are a year old or so and they're not rolling, then they go down the road. I mean, I won't sell them or give them away to anybody. They go to the dog trainer, to be honest with you. But
They go in the green kit box, huh?
yeah, they go in the cull pen. Yeah, and I just had a guy pick up about 200 birds yesterday, actually. Mainly racing homers from the race, but he did get some rollers and stuff like that. I am lucky. To me, I guess. Okay, let me answer it this way too. If you got somebody in your area who needs birds to fly, then give them those birds. If you know they're out of good birds, my birds, any of my birds that I don't, if I get too many cocks or something, or I get some birds that are 10, 15 footers and I don't want them, then they go to my friend Rich Farr, which I've known since I was a little kid. And he's in our region. I've been trying to bug him to get a breeding loft so I can loan him some pairs and he can breed his own, but he don't want to do that. So all my extra birds go to him. But if they're outright culls, I cull them. But I thought you were going to ask a question about when to stock a bird.
Or that's coming up too. So why don't you get to that?
Is that part of it? Because stocking a bird has a lot. Okay, I've flown in different parts. I've flown in 4 different regions in the U.S. Okay, and some of those regions I was hammered by the Cooper Hawks, and to a lesser extent Falcons. Usually that was seasonal. I'm not like some of these guys in around the mountains of Utah or in California where they just get hammered all the time by Falcons. My problem's always been Cooper Hawks. So if I was in an area where I had a lot of Cooper Hawks, I might stock a little bit earlier than I would out here in Central Washington, where I can fly birds for as long as I want, pretty much. I don't lose many pigeons. I lost some in the finals this year when Brent Martindale was here, but that's because they flew into the fog. And I would have never flown those pigeons if it wasn't for the finals. But they scored 90 points in 5 minutes, and they were well on their way to win. And I was like, because the 20 bird, I fell flat on my face. I had them way too strong, and they were flying around acting stupid. And they only did 3 big breaks, and then we flew the 11 bird, and the next day, and the birds did extremely well, but they went into the fog and they were gone. I lost 4 birds out of that kit. But when you stock a bird, it has a lot to do with your environment. Are you getting hammered by the Falcons all the time? If you got a pigeon that comes in the roll at like 4 months old, 5 months old, and this bird's spinning its ass off and it's a year old, and you're constantly getting hit by the Falcons, well, then you might need to think about stocking that bird. But if you live in an area like mine where you don't have a lot of birds of prey, you can fly them out for a year and a half, 2 years, or whatever. And a lot of it has to do with just your gut feeling about the pigeon and when did it come into the spin. If a pigeon comes in the spin at 8 or 9 months old, do you really want to stock it at 12 months old? No. It's only been so. A lot of guys ask, well, what age do you stock birds? To me, it has a lot to do with how long the pigeon's been rolling, not how old the pigeon is. So if I have a pigeon that's If I have a pigeon that starts rolling at 4 months and 8 months later and it's 12 months old and that sucker's spinning his ass off and it's one of the best birds in the kit, you're damn right I'll probably try it out, because those are an anomaly. Those are not no, those are rare. But if I have a pigeon that is a year old and it's not doing nothing, and especially if it's a cock bird, then I get rid of them. I'll get rid of those birds, And if I think they're useful, then they go to my friend Rich Farr. If not, they go to the dog trainer. But in my family, my birds kit very, very tight, very tight. And if I get too many cockbirds in the kit, they control the kit and they make them fly fast. So you gotta get them some guns out of there. And so I'll get rid of a cockbird a lot faster than I will a hen. If a hen looks perfect on the perch and all her brothers and sisters are rolling good, then I might give her a little bit more time. But typically, I guess to answer your question, I move past the cockbirds a lot faster than I do the hens. And if I start running out of space, then all the birds that don't roll and they're, close to 10, 11, 12 months old, then they get moved out, because I want birds to come in the spin at 4, 5, 6, 7 months old. That's my goal,
Let's get into like your competition birds, your kit birds. At what age do you feel that you see in your birds they're on the competitive level? You say you like birds coming in 4 or 5 months. At what age are they ready for competition? Do you feel that they have to go into the next fly season to where they're more mature to maybe master their control or whatever? I mean, for whatever reason.
No.
And when do you feel that it's the best on the team? Are there older birds, or do you need to keep those younger birds? Do they need to be 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old birds to have that super team?
I'm gonna answer this just like I think Brian did the other day, because I told you he's the only interview I've ever watched from start to finish, because I don't usually take the time to sit there and watch them all. There's a lot of them I'd like to, but I think what Brian said, and it's the same thing I would say, is that I don't give a shit how old they are, as long as they can contribute to the team. And I think that they are stable enough to go in that competition team. They're going in that team. Now, if I have a bird that is very, very young and it just started rolling like a week or two before competition, I probably am not going to take a chance and put that in the team, because when I get my birds ready for competition, I'm going to cut the feedback on them. And the young birds don't like it when you cut the feedback on them, right? They can get unstable, or they won't fly as long and all this other crap. So, Jerry, you're going to get your best teams off of old bird teams. You're going to get your best performance off of old bird teams. You'll get a lot of activity off of young bird teams. Young bird teams typically are more frequent. There's guys that have won big flies with young bird teams. I've won flies with predominantly young birds. But to answer your question, if I've got a competition coming up and I got some young birds that are really kicking ass and they're better. See, in my team, I rank my pigeons like 1 through 20 in my head. I know who's number 1 and who's number 20. Yeah. And those bottom tier birds typically are birds that are less frequent or shorter than I like, and so I'll move them. And if they're short and not real frequent, then of course they're going to get moved out. But you just constantly working towards some nice medium to deep birds that work together and can roll a minute or more. And that's what it's all about. So to me, age is not a big factor. It's just, it's a stability issue. If I feel the bird is stable enough and can handle being in that team, because a lot of young birds, they could be the superstar within that young bird kit. Ray's shaking his head. He knows this. And you move them into an old bird team and they fail. They're like, oh, hell, I'm out of here. I can't handle all this. There's too much going on, man. This is too much stress, because, so they can't handle it. But, try them out. I mean, if you got a competition coming up, you got some young birds and they're better than the lower tier birds in the competition team, then throw them in there and see if they can handle it. And that also brings up another little tip too. is that you should always fly more birds in your competition team than 20. You always want to fly about 24, 25, because when you pull birds out of the team, it has less of an impact than if you add a bird to the team. It usually, even in a tight knit family like mine, it takes them 2, 3 times. So if they've been in that team before, usually it takes them 2 flies before they actually find their spot, and the team doesn't act all herky jerky. But having said that, if your birds are super stiff and they're not doing squat, sometimes you add a young bird to the team and it will spark them. It's just like that's what Monty
Nice.
Neal did when he won his last World Cup.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about all that right
19
now
heads in one
too.
clap.
Yeah, man. You know what? That makes sense. If they ain't doing squat at a youngster, man, that's something I'm gonna have to apply and check that out.
What was that, Jerry? What did you say?
That makes sense about like if they're stiff and you add a young bird.
Oh yeah, bro.
I'm gonna have to apply to that and test it out here. I mean, that makes a
I mean,
lot of
we
sense.
can't be
Thanks for
telling
that.
too many. We can't be telling too many secrets because Ray's in my region, and even though he's one of my best friends, I got to fly against
Here,
him.
I'm just gonna mute him right now.
Yeah, mute Ray out so he can't hear this shit.
Nah, nah. That's that's
No, but
that's
that worked. Ray knows I don't keep no secrets, man, from nobody. I mean,
But just remember what Rick said. Sometimes a young bird, you put them
yeah,
into an old bird kit and they can't handle it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to test them to see.
Yeah.
Sometimes they
Don't
can't.
don't 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 do it right before a competition. Do
Well,
it
definitely not that.
do it a
Yeah,
week or two prior
a
and see
week
if
or
they can
two.
handle it.
And,
Yeah.
and why don't you get into that to a weekend two prior? Like, what are your what's your program like, man? Your fry schedule, your feed schedule.
Oh Lord.
I know. I mean, everybody has their way of doing things, but like, what do you look for? Like,
Now
okay,
we're really telling
yeah,
secrets.
you gotta be like, okay, Rick, we're about to do this. I got my date. When do you start? Prior to that date, that you gotta open up that kit box.
Man, I used to I used to have it down to a fine science, but lately I haven't. That's probably why I'm not winning like I used to. But like I said, I'll use it for an excuse all day long. I got this one off race, and it's really monopolizes my time. But um, if I got a really super good team, maybe about 14 days out, I put something on paper and I say, okay, this is the day I got to fly. These are how many rest days I want. If I write down the date that I got to fly, and then typically I want to rest them 2 days prior because I want them to come out deep and fast. And if you just fly them all the time, you don't really know what they're going to do. I mean, they're not my birds. Any family of rollers I've ever been associated with or tried to fly, if you rest them, they come out deeper. Opposed to just fly them every damn day. So what I do is I put it on a piece of paper. I'll find the fly date, and then I back up 2 days from that. That'll be their last fly, and then I typically fly them every other day leading up to the last day before the fly. Or one thing that I've done in the past is if I don't have a lot of time, I'll fly them for 3 days straight, rest them 2 days, and then compete. If my schedule's all screwed up due to commitments or whatever, pigeon race, but I wouldn't say there's a dyed in the wool program that I use. It's just kind of like observing the kit and knowing what they need to do. Like if they're super stiff, then I know I got to pull some tricks out of that. I'm gonna have to cut the feed back. If my kits get stiff, it's usually because the cockbirds are screwing things up, and that's why I typically like to fly hen heavy kits. But there's been years where, like that kit that Ray and I talk about that I flew back in the mid '90s when I was here in Yakima up the road by the firing center. I think there were 13 cocks in that kit. You know,
Do you house them together though? Like the cock together?
I've done it both ways, Jerry. I've when I get close to a competition, I like to separate the sexes and then release them together. And when they come down, feed them together as long as they're behaving and the cocks aren't acting stupid, and then immediately separate them. Now, if they don't want to behave, it's like spring or something, and they want to mate, then I'll separate the sexes, let them calm down a few minutes, then feed them. But I think that's the best way to fly rollers is to keep the sexes separate and then fly them together and then separate the sexes afterwards. I was doing that before I went to England. I saw a lot of guys in England doing it. I know that there's a lot of people here in the States that do it. It just makes sense, especially in the winter time, you can get away with having your cocks and hens together because the cock birds are not, stimulated. Their testes have not dropped. They when it gets cold, they suck up into the pigeon, and the hens are not sexually active, so you can house them together. But when we've got sunlight out and it's nice and warm, and the pigeon's natural desire is to breed, then you should probably keep the sexes separate. I think you get a performance boost out of them too when you mix them together for competition. Um, but again, the ultimate goal is to fly a kit of uh, full sisters or full brothers. So you want to keep the sexes separate. And even if you're not at that point, which none of us probably ever have been, but I want to be the first to do that. I really do. I want to fly a kit of full sisters. Um, I think they'll be something special, and you guys will really like them. But I did that when I was in North Carolina before I went to England. I saw a lot of the guys in England doing it. There's a lot of people around the world that do that, is keep the sexes separate. That's important. But as far as setting the birds up for a competition, typically what I'll do is I'll put them on my flying mix, like I told you earlier, is heavy on wheat, a little bit of milo, some safflower, barley. Barley is really important in rollers. It has a calming effect on them. It makes them fly slower and all that stuff. They don't herky jerky around and stuff. And then on their last day, that I'll fly them that way probably for about 5 or 6 flies in a row every other day. And then the last day that they fly, I'll change them over to a good mix, or I'll increase the protein and then change the feed on the next day, depending upon, or the next 2 days, depending upon what I'm trying to get out of them, what I'm seeing out of them. Do they need a protein boost? Do they need, the feed cut back on them? Can they handle the feed being cut back on them? That's really it.
Yeah, so you pretty
Nothing
much
special, man. It's
you
all in the breeding, Jerry. It's
yeah.
you got to have the you. I mean, I'm not saying you can have the best spinners in the world and you can screw them up by feeding them a racing pigeon mix, which I do quite
So
often when
pretty
I'm just
much you manipulate them with the feed as in the fly time to get them
yeah.
to peak out ready for competition.
How do you feed them on those rest days, Rick? The two, because you adjust the rest days sometimes too, right? It's not always 2 days. Sometimes you'll do three. Sometimes you'll do one.
Not typically three, unless
No.
unless no, they kind of fall apart. 3 day rest would be good for like an 11 bird fly, because if you rest them 3 days, they typically are going to come out waterfall. They might, if they're a really good team, they've been together for a while, and they're closely related, and you let them birds out after a 3 day rest, they'll come out in waterfall, and then they kind of get it together.
Hmm. Hmm.
But problem is, we get a lot of these judges whose, how do I say it, their eyesight's not really great, or they're older guys,
Hmm.
and their impression of your birds is what they saw when the birds come out of the kit box. So
Yeah.
when the birds get up high, they think, oh, they're still just doing the same thing. Well, they're not.
No.
They've cleaned it up, but they don't see that, because in their mind's eye, they saw what they saw the first couple minutes.
Hmm.
You
Now,
know,
are you feeding differently on the rest days? Are you feeding less or?
see, I'm trying to go around that subject because you've been trying to get this out of me for 10 years. No, yeah, Ray. I told, that's just like what I told Jerry. I mean, yeah, I typically yo-yo them like Monty used to talk about. The last day that they fly, I'll feed them a full feeding, and then the next day it's usually like a three-quarter or half feeding, and then the day after that it's going to be a half a feeding. Hell, if I was flying hens, I probably could get away with not feeding them at all, because when I'm flying my own pigeons, a lot of times I won't feed the hens the day before I'm going to fly them, because them some guns out here in this arid desert, they want to go up high,
Yeah.
you know. and that's frustrating as hell. So the only way I can control them was with feed. But then a lot of times, if you keep yo-yoing the feed and find your young birds too much, you're going to get them in a real light, buoyant condition, and their natural desire is to go high. So that's why with your competition birds, you don't need to fly them all the time. You need to back off them. You need to focus on your young birds as much as possible, and then use your competition birds just for competition. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not one of them guys that takes my old birds, my competition birds, and just puts them to the side and never ever flies them throughout the year. I don't get them ready before a competition.
Yeah.
I fly them year round, but I try to keep the old birds out of shape. They might fly only twice a week or maybe once a week, especially if I'm focusing on young birds. If I got young birds and I'm settling and really liking what I'm seeing and I don't have a lot of time, then I'll fly them. They become my priority, and then the old birds go on the back burner. And then as I get closer to the competitions, the old birds become the priority, and the young birds go on the back burner.
Mhm.
So I don't like to fly my young birds. I like to fly them. I'm retired now. I do have this pigeon business, but I got some people working for me. So I like to get out there early in the morning and get my bird flying done. I don't like to fly rollers after like 10 o'clock or so, because they typically will go real high and fly real long and develop bad habits. And it's just part of, but I never had this problem when I lived in different parts of the country. When I lived in North Carolina and Alabama, my birds, I didn't have a problem with them pin dotting out because they wouldn't, because it was humid and a different type of air. Texas, they would go high in the summertime. The fall and spring, they wouldn't. It has a lot to do. My experience isn't just based upon flying out of this backyard. And a lot of guys' experience is just that, flying out of their own backyard. I've flown, in 4 different parts of the country, and I learned a lot. I took something from that everywhere I went.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the thing. Like with all these podcasts that we're doing, it's not gonna necessarily be the thing for you. You know what I mean? But if you don't apply it, you're never gonna know. You know what I'm saying? So, and the trick to it is that you gotta start applying and seeing if it works, and not try to do it right before competition because so and so said to do it that way, because that's gonna ruin you. You know what I'm saying? And you'll
oh, bro,
never. And
I'll tell you something funny. Check this.
the thing real quick, the thing is that
Yeah.
when they do that and it doesn't work out, they give up on it, and they really
Yeah.
never even tried it out.
Well, Joe Bob Stuka, he was like he's a big brother to me. Okay. People don't know he quit flying competition because he's got some sickness. He's got some things going on. So he can't fly anymore. It's really too bad of a thing because, man, I thought the world of that guy. He went to like the equivalent to Top Gun that the Navy and they go to for the Air Force. He was second in his class. The guy was one of Terry Bradshaw's backup quarterbacks in college. You guys probably don't know that. Joe Bob was a football player. He was a quarterback. He's just a stud, man. So to see him in the condition he's at now, where he has a hard time even remembering his family, that's really hard for me. But Joe Bob was notorious. I mean, this guy was a fighter pilot, so his whole thing was speed, speed. Rickster, I gotta see some speed, man. That's all he talked about is blurs all the time, and he was notorious for screwing his birds up before a competition. He was always doing something different. So he'd let his birds out, and I'd be like, "All right." He'd let fly up 2 or 3 minutes. I'd be like, "What the hell did you do this time?" "Oh man, I tried this. He tried putting tea in the water. He tried. I mean, he just did all kinds of weird shit." And so I was going to a military school in Virginia, and I said, "Man, you need to change because his kit boxes. He walked in his kit loft. He had 6 kit boxes, but they were from the roof to the floor. So the birds were down on the floor trying to mate up, flying up and down all day long. I said, you need to put a false floor in here, so all the shit will fall through. Get the birds up off the floor. Anyway, long story short, I judged the regional fly. He won the regional fly. And I said, this kid is capable of winning the World Cup. They only scored like, I don't remember, 382 or something, under 400 points. And wouldn't you know it? I mean, Rick Shading, I think, was a judge that year. He won the World Cup that year, and it was just a simple little change, loft design. That was it.
Mhm.
A loft design. It helped him with that. There's a lot of little tricks to this, man. I mean, um, but it's not rocket science. It's all easy. I mean, it's just you got to be in a good area. You got to have some good birds. You got to be disciplined enough to get up, fly your birds. This sport is very difficult because you have to have good observational skills, and a lot of people don't. You have to. This is much harder than flying racing pigeons. Racing pigeons, you raise a bunch, you take them down the road. The best ones make it home. The worst ones don't, or they come slow, and you get rid of them. Rollers, you have to observe every single pigeon and know the difference between them. And not everybody can do that. They don't have the aptitude for that, the attention span to do that. And to be honest, I don't like flying kits all day long, man. I mean, I got stuff I want to do. I want to go fishing, or Ray knows me. I like to try out a different restaurant about every well, let's just say every day or so. I like to eat. I don't want to get out there flying pigeons all day. So Jerry, it comes back to that. You were saying something about mob flying, and we got off subject with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You were asking me about mob flying. I like to mob fly my young birds. One tip that I'll give you guys. Ray knows how my kit boxes were set up when I was in Yakima in the mid '90s. You have little dividers between your kit boxes under the perches so that you can merge kits together and fly them as one team. The reason for that is because in years past, if I didn't have a lot of time, or maybe I was in the Army and had to go out to the field for a week and my birds didn't get flown, I didn't have time to fly 3 or 4 different kits, because that's usually what I kept when I was in the Army. For a long time, I just had 3 kits. I had 2 young bird kits and a competition team. So I started mom flying to get them all exercised, and because rollers don't do good if you sit them in the kit box for weeks on end. I mean, unless you absolutely have to, or they're going, whatever, they're sick. But if you set your kit boxes up to where there's dividers between the kit boxes, like under the perches, then you can fly all your young birds as one team, because when they come in the kit box, they're all going to be at the same level. All the feed trays are in there, everything. So my kit boxes had 32 perches each when I was in the mid '90s, and so that was 4 kit boxes, 128 pigeons. I could fly them all at the same time when I pulled the dividers out, the 3 dividers between those 4 kit boxes. I do the same thing now. In fact, the kit loft, I bought a 10 by 20 loft that's slanted one way. It's going to be beautiful, and I'm going to put 7 or 8 kit boxes in there on the wall, and I'm going to have dividers between them so that when I get all my young birds settled, I can fly them all as one mob. I fly like 100 pigeons at a time. When I was before, when I lived in Texas, and when I lived in when I flew, when Ray first met me, I had 4 kit boxes, and there was 128 perches in there, 32 per, and I'd fly them all at the same time a lot of times just to get them exercise. And where a lot of guys go wrong is they have so many pigeons that they can't fly them all properly. They have kits that they just. I went to people's houses and they say, "Oh, there's a kit of young birds. They've been sitting there for 3 months." Like, what are you talking about? Why?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have time to fly those. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Why don't you just fly them?
You gotta know what's too much that you can't handle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, but it doesn't hurt them to fly a bunch of them at the same damn time, just to get them exercised. And
Yeah.
so when I was in the Army, I didn't have a lot of time to fly birds, maybe 1 kit a day. And so what I would do is right before a competition, about 2 or 3 weeks before a competition, I would take all the best birds and put them in 1 kit box. And believe me, I watched those pigeons enough. Even out of 100 pigeons, you kind of know which one's your best birds.
Mhm.
So I'd stick all those in 1 kit box. And then, and this is my favorite part when I was in the Army. I think I was doing it better than I'm doing it now. I would fly all those good birds. Like, I'd do it on a weekend. I'd say, okay, I'm gonna like Friday afternoon, I'd cut my birds back on their feed, and I'd say, okay, Saturday morning, I'm going to get up early. I'm going to fly all the kits. I'm going to fly the birds as separate kits. So I'd fly that kit, that I knew were all true spinners that I had recognized, and I'll fly them and go, oh man, that's good. And then I would fly the other kits like in smaller groups and say, wait a second, there's a good one, or there's a good one. So there'd be 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 that would escape me, and then I would throw them in there if I had room. And then if I had a lot of spinners, I'd make 2 teams out of them, and that's how I did it when I was in the Army. And I was kicking ass, man. I was doing good in the World Cup, the fall fly, everything.
I know you've topped, man, top 10. Let me see, an 11 bird, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. 11, 12, 18, and 2019. 20 bird, you did 2008. You scored over 1,000 points. I mean, you've been on the top, man. You know what I mean? But and I know what you talk about. Knowing the pigeon and especially the patterns of your birds, man. You have a lot of white on them. I don't know how someone does that has a lot of blackbirds or
Very
recessive
important,
reds.
man.
It just, I don't know how they could do it. You know what I mean? But
I'm gonna tell you, that's what I noticed, Jerry. I'll tell you one of the secrets to, it's not a secret. One of the things to flying good rollers is you got to be able to tell them birds apart every time you let them out. Not just before competition, every time you let them out. Obviously, you want to have white flights, white tails, mixed flights, mixed tails. You don't want to have them all the same color. Ray will tell you, if I raise a solid black birds, which pops up in my birds, I get rid of that sucker quick. I got 2 duns out. I dabble in. I got some dilute in my birds. I got a couple duns that I need to give to Ray. I hate them damn and one of them's got solid flights. I will not keep a solid flighted bird on my property because it's just like white flights. It'll take over your loft, but also dark flights will too. And I don't want dark flights in my kit. So when you have white flights, mixed tails, mixed flights, all that stuff, you can tell a lot of them apart just by their color or their pattern. But the ones you can't, man, pull out the freaking Halloween spray. I mean,
yeah,
you ought to see when my birds look like a rainbow when it comes to competition day. And and I'll tell you, and I'll give you guys, so that's really important.
Yeah.
Is to breed. When I went to England, I didn't see any.
Yeah, me
solid
neither. I
color.
even asked them, and they're like, "Nah, we don't want them things. We can't even tell them
No,
apart."
no, you can't tell them apart. And the thing is, the dark colored birds too, man, they look great when it's a gray sky. Oh
Yeah,
man, they look fantastic. I mean, you're like, holy shit. But the white colored birds, man, they stand out like a sore thumb. You know, and then conversely, the same thing can be said. Like on a bright day, some people think the dark ones look better than the whites, and some people think the white flighted ones look better than the darks. But I can tell you from my experience that the dark flighted birds are going to look better more times than not than the white birds. So the white flighted birds, they're going to show their true colors, man. If they look like crap, they're going to show they look like crap. And I like that. And I also like being able, if you have 3 or 4 different colors of hairspray, you can mark your birds up 100 different ways, man.
yeah,
And you can tell them all apart. And that's really important. Another thing I'll tell you guys too, we're not, and this isn't about competition, this is just about daily flying, is if you got some pigeons in your team on your property that you really, really like and you're thinking about breeding from, you need to keep them birds painted up all the time. So that way, I got one cock out there, Ray knows which one it is, and Tony knows which one it is. This ash red cock, he's about 7 years old, and I always keep his tail painted red, always. So every time he spins, I know which one he is,
yeah, yeah. That
And
makes
he's
sense.
not as frequent as he used to be, but man, that summer gun is deep. Boy, he's deep. And but he's not that frequent anymore, so I don't know if I'll breed from him or not. But man, he's a good spinner. But you need to, don't mark your birds up like right before a competition
Mm,
and trying to find which birds to put in the team. You need to keep marked up year round, so you
yeah,
kind of like know which ones are which, so that when it comes time to compete,
that makes
um,
sense. Yeah, sometimes I
yeah,
just go all wild and I do one wing, but I never paid attention to that. If I keep that same pattern of marking, you always know what bird it is.
well, I go through. What I do is I go through with one can of colored hairspray in my hand, and I go through and grab all the birds that I feel I need to mark up for a competition. Maybe some young birds that maybe there's 2 or 3 young birds that look the same color. I'm not 100% sure which one it is. Then I go through with one colored hairspray and I'll go, left wing red, right wing red, two wings red, tail red,
Yeah.
left wing plus tail, right wing plus tail,
Yeah.
left primary, right primary, or just the tips,
Yeah.
two tips, ribbon tail. I do all kinds of crap, and then when I go, okay, I think I've pretty much run out of color combination. Then I go to the next color,
Yeah.
Next
and I
color.
just go all the way through my birds, and then when I let them out, they're like looking at each other like, "Who the hell are you?" But it only takes a few minutes, and then
Yeah, especially I mean that work out like you
and
have
then-
them on different kits. You could even do the same pattern, but this is out of kit one and
yes,
kit two.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know what
yeah.
I'm saying? But hey, Ray, we're getting past the 2 hours. Why don't you ask him some questions on judging? I know you have experience in judging, Ray.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Put something down, some questions for him that could you know.
Well, let me say a couple of things because after the judging, I think we're going to pretty much be done.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things
And I was just getting warmed up.
All right, we
I'm
could
sure
be
you
here all
are.
day, man.
I'm sure you are. But there are a couple of things that I think I mentioned before that I think that there are very few people in the hobby that's done as well as Rick. Over the years, over such a long period of time, and knowing him well, I can tell you that honestly, I think that there are also very few people that are good at both as a breeder and as a flyer. Most of us are good at one or the other, not both. And I think Rick is one of those guys. He's good at both. His observation skills are there. That's obvious, because he's done so well. And he's told us how that does. And that's why when you mention judging, I know how Rick feels about judging. But tell us your idea, Rick, when it comes to judging. I've often talked about making a chart for depth, for instance.
Yeah.
Quality is a little bit harder to do, but when it comes to depth, let's talk about that a little bit. When judging, how do you use the factors?
Well, there's a chart that's floating around, and it's actually a chart that I made and I gave to Steve Clayton when I judged years ago. Steve Clayton was still into rollers, and I was going through Arkansas, and it was in '96. I was judging the national fly, and I was on my way to Gil Rand's on the plane from Yakima, Washington, where I was stationed I was stationed out here, and Ray, just met Ray like a year prior. I met Ray in '95, '96. I went out there judging, and I wrote on, remember those green memorandum books we had, Ray? Not the little ones you had in basic training, but the big, the NCOs that we carried around with the sergeants and stuff. And so I was writing on it, and I said I need to come up with a way to award these multipliers, and I came up with a quality chart 1 through 10, 1.0 all the way down to 2.0, and basically a 1.0 was a blur, and then it went on down the line. You guys okay? I didn't see Ray move there, so I thought we were froze up. Anyway, I did that, and then I did the same thing on depth, and I think a 2.0 was 50 foot, and so you're asking about how do I score depth? You're talking about how do I judge depth, or how do I award the multipliers for depth?
The multipliers for depth.
The multipliers for depth. Okay. Well, I'd have to look at basically a 1.0 is a 10 footer, or 10 to 14, and then 1.1 is a 1.5, and it just goes all the way down, and then 50 foot would be a 2.0. But it's the overall average of of all the birds that spun on the breaks, not the birds that rolled between the breaks, but the breaks that were scoreable. Then you just take the overall average in your mind's eye. I mean, I'm just going to throw it, 10 footers a 1.0, 50 footers a 2.0. So say a 1.5 is a 25 footer, where all the birds in the kit, and that's basically where most kits fall, is about, it's actually, well, this is going to sound kind of funny, but I was going to say 15 to 25, but it's really about the 18 to 25 foot range. It's right there between that 15 and 20 foot to 25. That's where most of the birds are. Now, guys will say, BS, my birds are deeper and da da. Look, man, a lot of people I think overestimate depth, and there's some people like me who probably underestimate depth. A lot of guys will look, I'll be standing next to them and go, "Oh my God, that's a 60-foot spin." I'm like, "Oh, I think it was like 35 or 30." I mean, it just depends. But as far as awarding the multipliers, it just comes down to the overall average depth of the birds that rolled on the breaks. It's that simple. And that's how I've always done it. That's kind of an easy answer, Ray. Quality, same thing. I mean, what's my overall impression of the birds, and what was the average quality? It's just like that. Going back to depth, we talk about Blake Coates, dude. I mean, if his birds would have went 100 foot every break, I mean, I'd give him a 4.0 if I could have. I mean, that was incredible. But they didn't. They shortened up after that break. And we've all seen that. A lot of times, if your birds have been rested for a long time, they'll come out and do one initial break, and it's just huge, really deep. Not necessarily huge, but you'll have some birds roll real deep. But it has to be what they did during that 20 minutes on all the breaks that you scored. What was the average?
Yeah.
I mean, assigning multipliers is simple, but guys get all mixed up on it. Quality is just simply the velocity and style of the birds that rolled on the breaks. You're not adding in how frequent they were or how deep they were or anything. It's just quality, velocity, and style, period. That's it,
Now,
So I don't know if that answered that question, Ray. You and I have scored side by side, and we're within of course, we co-judged a region a while back, and we were within a point of each other, but the birds weren't doing shit anyway.
well, we talked. You talked a little bit about, the birds come out, and they do a big break. They haven't even warmed up yet. They haven't gotten to the point where they've got up to height. Where they're gonna usually stay, and where they really start working together. And like you said, some guys come out, when the first break they see, they say, okay, oh, well, that's the depth they're going to be, and that's the quality they're going to be, which is not true. Because once the kid gets up, at a good height where they feel comfortable, and you start to see some real action, you really need to watch that kid, and that's where you figure out the real quality and depth factor. Those first couple of 3 or 4 breaks are usually really, they're okay, but they're not the best. A good team, I mean, if it's a good team, they're not the best they're gonna do. They're gonna do better. Do you see that? I mean,
all the time. Yeah, all the time. I mean, a lot of that has to do with eyesight too, man, because a lot of people just don't have good eyes. They get to a certain height, they just can't see what's going on up there. I've been blessed with good eyesight. I was a sharpshooter. I shot in the Army. I was selected for stuff like that, but I got good eyes. I need glasses for reading, but for as far as stuff way out there, I can see really sharp. So there's been times where I'll score the birds a little bit higher than what some judges will score them, because I feel like I can see what's going on. I'm not saying I got eagle eyes or anything, or but I can definitely tell what's going on. I mean, you're talking, one word I wanted to use too when you asked me about depth, and I didn't say it, and I should have, is duration. Duration of spin is far more important to me than depth.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not saying I want a bunch of 10-footers that hold in one spot and roll like a blur. I want depth. Hell, all of us want our birds to go 50, 60 feet. Hell, if we could get them to go 100 feet, that'd be even better, wouldn't it? But, if you've been around this for a while, you know that, kind of, 40, 50 foot, usually their maximum. They don't normally go much deeper than that, 50, 60 foot sometimes. But duration of spin is highly, highly important to me. I love to see birds wrap up tight, where you can't see the wings coming or going or above your head. They look like a little blur, and they just hold it. And the way you get them to do that, you got to have that. You got to have that engine in the pigeon, but they also have to be in really good shape, and they have to be buoyant. If they're nice and buoyant, they'll spin like, man, it's like that, like they almost spinning in place sometimes, especially if you have an uplifting wind. And that's where some people in the past, you've heard stories about birds that just spun in one place. Well, they're not doing that from sheer velocity. It's just because the wind catches them going, a certain way, and they get suspended momentarily. And I've seen that too. I've seen them roll sideways across the. I remember one year. I don't want to say who the judge is. It was a World Cup. It was a finals. I think it was a national finals, and I was in Texas, and the wind was extremely windy. It was really windy, and the birds were getting blown sideways, and the judge wasn't scoring them. And I got kind of pissed. I'm like, well, shit, it ain't my fault the damn wind's blowing them sideways, But since they weren't falling straight down, he wouldn't score them, and the birds were kind of rolling sideways or at an angle downwards, and they wouldn't get scored. But duration of spin is far more important to me than just mere depth. I mean, shit, man, we can all raise deep birds. It's trying to get them birds to roll with velocity, style, and depth, and to break in unison. I mean, you get a lot of these people, naysayers, that say, "Oh, you competition guys are ruining the breed and all this crap." Look, man, I've been all over the country, been to England, been to Canada, seen the top guys. The people find the best kits are the ones competing.
Yeah.
Because competition, there's an old saying, it's in the Bible. It says iron sharpens iron. Competition makes us better. This internet, social media is good, but but like Facebook, man, it's created a lot of arguments, and strife. But, that's just something you can accept or not. If you don't like it, get off of social media, but
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, and I just mentioned you placed in the top 10 in both flies, 2011 birds. You were the first master flyer, right? In 90, what do you say?
97.
97. Congrats to that. 2019 lifetime achiever, right? Lifetime achiever. What are your future goals?
Yeah.
What are your future goals, man? What are you going after?
My goals are real simple. I don't want to sound braggadocious or anything, because I'm not that kind of guy. Everything I've done in the hobby, it's from longevity. I don't consider myself one of the top flyers in the world anymore. At one time I was. Right now I've got this damn pigeon race that's screwing everything up, and I can't fly at the level that I want to fly. But when I retire, when I polygamy breed, I'm in a good spot, Jerry, and Ray knows this too. We get a lot of wind out here, but there's not a lot of hawks. And I could fly a world-class kid out here. My goal is to win the World Cup, win the national fly, win the Leopard fly, which I've placed second in all those flies numerous times.
Yep.
Numerous times, which is kind of precarious. We won't get into that. I mean, when you come in second place like 8 times, I mean, that's kind of weird, man. And a couple of them times I know I should have won, but when you got a strong personality like me and you're boisterous, sometimes guys are going to hold that against you, and I feel like that's happened a couple times. But anyway, I don't want to go in deep into that. My goal is to be a real dominant flyer again, and my ultimate goal is not so much to win. It's to show everybody what this breed is capable of in my mind's eye, and what my mind's eye. Ray and I saw a really, really good team in the mid-90s last year, all off at one top. My goal is to breed a kid of full brothers or full sisters, and to show the world what these birds can really do. And I know, I've seen it with my own eyes, you guys, that when you breed that way, and I had 37 birds in North Carolina back in the mid-90s that were all full brothers and sisters. When you breed that way, you create a team that Most people have never seen anything even similar to that. Just the exactness in the breaks. That's what I want to show the world. I want to show them what the birds can do. I know I got it in me. I just got to get focused. Um, these racing pigeons, they got to go, but I'm going to do it for at least another year or two. The money's really good. Last year we had the second biggest race in the U.S., made a bunch of money. We can afford to do stuff like, get the house, all the floors in the house redone, stuff like that. It's not all about the money. I got into the racing pigeon business to show people I could do it. That was my goal. The second year I was in the racing pigeons, I was second in the whole country in the American Racing Pigeon Union. I have a second in the President's Cup. The same year, 2013, I was second in the President's Cup. I qualified for the World Cup, and I was 20 in the 11 and 20 in the 20. Second in the 11 and second in the 20. And that was, I don't think anybody ever have a pigeon flying day a year like that where you're at the top of your game in racing pigeons and rollers. But I guess my number one goal is just to show people what the breed is capable of, and to have witnesses and maybe even video it to show people from an educational standpoint, hey, this is what they should do. They should break at least once a minute, 2 times even better, have some 3/4 turns, none of this quarter turn waterfall crap. I want to show that. Another goal, which is kind of a superficial goal, is I want to become the top master flyer guy again. Don Olette is right there. Son of a gun, Donald, if you're listening, I'm coming for your ass. I was, at one time, Jay Starling and I were number one. We were both tied at 985 points. And then I was moving around in the military and deployed and all this crap. And Don just shot up above me. And then before I knew it, Clay Hoyle was above me, and I think Tim Decker and Jay Starling. Well, I dropped all the way down to 5th. And now I'm back up to 2nd. I want to take Don out. That's my goal. And I like Don, but I want to get up to the top again in the master flyer points. This year I did this year, well, the 11 bird doesn't pay off much, but I almost won that 11 bird, guys. I mean, they went into if it wasn't for that, I think I'd have been 1st or 2nd this year. But, after I get done with this racing pigeon business, then I plan on setting the world on fire as far as the World Cup and the national flies and all that stuff, and really showing what I can do with these birds. I want to take it a totally different level than I ever have before, and that's kind of the goal.
Now, last question. A word of advice for everybody in the hobby. It could be a veteran, someone new in the hobby, someone that's having trouble with the hobby. What do you got to say for us to give us a word of advice?
It's the old cliche. It's the same thing that we all say, and I'll say it over and over and over again. You got to get out of your backyard and you got to go visit. Go find the top flyers. If you can't travel abroad, like I know Jerry, he'll jump on a plane and go to England or someplace. I mean, that guy's dedicated. But you gotta get out of your backyard and go see the top guys and see what they're doing. Quit sitting on the internet and bitching about everything and saying, oh, this, that. Just go see it for yourself and see what these guys are doing. Like Brian McCormick's setting the world on fire now. Go see his birds. Go see what the guy's doing. Go sit down and talk with him. That's how you learn. But another thing I will say is this, and a lot of people will, maybe disagree or where they're not in a situation. But if you're in an area where you're just getting hammered by the hawks and the falcons, move if you can. Get the hell out of there. Go fly some if you're really, really serious about this and you're diving the real roller fire and you want to fly rollers the rest of your life and you want to go out there and just relax and let your pigeons out while you're drinking your coffee, move. Don't live in the city limits. Get out somewhere in the country where you can protect your birds, if you know what I mean, if need be. Don't have no neighbors. I know not everybody can do what I'm saying, but I have friends that have lived like in California, for example, and they didn't have much of a house in California, but their house was worth $500,000, and they sold it and they moved somewhere else where they could fly. I know Jerry's thinking about doing the same thing. Him and I talked privately about that yesterday. There's some challenges with that, with wife working and his job, but eventually have a goal. Most of these guys that are winning, uh, competitions, they live out in the country somewhere and they can protect their birds, or they don't have much of a bird of prey program or problem. It's like this. I said one time, I've said this many times, and this is no disrespect to my friend Heine Biker, but if Heine Biker had falcons, we'd be like, Heine who? Who's that guy? We wouldn't even know who he is.
Yeah.
You know? Same
Right.
thing like with Kevin McKinney. I mean, really good flyer, no foul, no fouls. You can't. So if you really want to truly enjoy this hobby, uh, get the hell out of the city and get out somewhere where you can protect your birds and don't have a bunch of neighbors. I know Ray just recently moved north of where he's at, so he's in that situation. That's good. I hope it works out for him. I hope he doesn't have. Are you flying birds over there yet?
Not yet. No.
Or are you flying them at the farm? So the main thing that any of us can do is you got to get out of your damn backyard and you got to go see the top guys and see what they're doing. Pay attention to their birds and pick their brains, and you'll find that the top people are all doing things similar. I'll tell you really something that kind of coincides with that. When I got into racing pigeons about 15 years ago, I wanted to be really good at what I did. I wanted to be the top flyer in the combine. So what I did was I looked at all the flyers records for the last 10 years, and I found the top 2 or 3 guys in the combine out of 55 flyers that were doing good. And I went to their house and checked them out. And I could tell these guys were really attention to detail type guys. They were smart. They knew what they were doing, and they were hard trainers and all that good stuff. And then I went and talked to my club mates that weren't doing very good, and I saw how they treated their birds. Well, guess what? Within a couple of years, I had the second best loft in the whole country out of about 10,000 flyers, because I did my homework. It's the same thing with rollers. If you want to, if you really, really want to be good at this, then go talk to the best guys, pick their brains. And for God's sakes, if you can, if it's possible, get out in the country somewhere where you can enjoy your pigeons, have some chickens, do whatever, and be able to protect your birds, and keep learning. We don't all know everything.
Knowledge
We
is
all
power. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, we all learn something from other people. And don't be afraid to try a new family. If your birds suck, man, get something different. Try it out. But then at the same time, don't be afraid to start your own family.
Correct.
Go around and check out different families. And if you see a family you really like and they need one little ingredient, well, then go find the guy that has that ingredient and put that bird into those birds and make your own family and become famous.
Nice.
Because you can do it.
Thank you so much, Rick, for coming through and being a guest. All this knowledge you shared with us today is very important. At least to me it is, and I hope it is to everybody else. Because, I mean, this is something we could tune in and listen to it over and over and over. And there's a lot here that we could pick up and get better at what we want to be at, in this hobby. So I want to thank you so much for giving us your time here. And it's a wrap. Thank you so much for everybody that tuning in, supporting, and let's keep this going. If anybody has anybody that they wanna tune into, be our guest here, help me and Ray have that connect to get them on here, because it's hard. It took us 3 years to get this guy here. You know what I mean? But all right, everybody.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for coming
tuning in,
on.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. Come visit me, Ray. I'll show you how to fish.
I'll be out there to show you how to cook.
Okay, good.
Hey, and
That's great.
I'm gonna go probably soon to go over there and pay you a visit in Yakima, man. I really
visit
want to
your
put together some good documentary on what you're doing out there with them with the
races.
racers, man.
Yeah, that's it's a